Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karma janavritam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktiruttamam. One should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. And is that the next one we're doing? No, this one. Okay. This week's, we can't get it just right. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatparatyain nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhaktiruchyate. Bhakti or devotional service means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Master of all the senses. When the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme, there are two side effects. One is free from our material designations, and simply by being employed in the service of the Lord, one's senses are purified. So those are the two definitions Rupa Goswami gives in the Nectar of Devotion for pure devotional service. I'm on a different internet system today because the temple system is down. I may check it periodically to see if it goes back up. If there's any difficulty, if you have any difficulty at all, please let me know, and I will every once in a while check to see if the temple system is working again. So your questions on Nectar of Instruction 4, 5, and 6. No, 4 and 5, just 4 and 5. Nectar of Instruction, chapters 4 and 5. And Prajananda sent me some questions from Yadutama, which I'm going to put here. All right, these questions are the life and soul of the class. To be able to serve the Lord life after life, is it necessary to be on earth again according to our karma, or do we just sort of show up wherever he wants us, karma having become irrelevant? The latter. We just show up wherever he wants us, karma is irrelevant. And it might not be in this earth planet, it might be on other planets, it might be a different universe, who knows? Chapter 4, okay. Indra's prayer seems that he knows Supreme Personality of Godhead very well. But why has he been projected so negatively, personality, from in most of the time? Yeah, that is a question. Indra is actually a very great devotee, and yet we have so many descriptions in the Bhagavatam, more of his problems than his glories. But we should remember that Indra is a great devotee. I see that those examples are given to remind us that even if you're a great devotee, you can still have problems. Don't be surprised when even, of course, Indra is generally portrayed as a Sakama devotee. He's a devotee who has some material thing to ask for the Lord. But still, we shouldn't be surprised if devotees have difficulty, or if we have difficulty, if even Indra has difficulty. We shouldn't be shocked. Oh my God. Devotees had some difficulty.
Hare Krishna Mataji. If the Indra is a kind of position, so
yes.
If in one set of universe, maybe a different type of person can be an Indra, so he performs very good, and then other Indra could be performing a little bit lesser, or it could be
that
like
is also certainly true. That is also certainly true. But usually the jiva who's appointed to Indra is a devotee, but a Sakama devotee. That's the qualification for becoming Indra. So generally we see that Indra has a tendency to use the position and grace of the Lord for some other purpose, because that's kind of the mood of Indra. One second, I'm going to just get some more natural light in here. But yes, Indra is a post. Indra literally means the chief. All right. Why devotees aspire not even to gain personal association? Yeah, the whole purpose is to associate with the Lord and serve him, right? Yes. Yes, but the devotees are more interested in service. Even less like when Lord Ramachandra sent his brothers out to do various things. And Prabhupada writes that he wasn't interested in just having his brothers hang around the palace enjoying life. They should do something. You know, you may love your husband, but you also want him to go to work. Yeah. Those who are already promoted to Vaikuntha planets. Okay, we'll talk about that in the class. Very good question. I'm glad you brought that up. We'll talk about that in class. Oh, okay. Excellent, excellent question. We'll talk about those in the class. And if I don't, Supriya, if I miss them, ask me again when we get to those slides, okay? So your questions about Vaikuntha, those are really deep and thoughtful questions. I really like them. When one is liberated, is there a chance for them to fall down? Yes. How is liberation different from being with the Lord in one of his dhams? Being with the Lord in one of his dhams is one form of liberation. There's not really a chance for anyone to fall, but as Ravindra Prabhu says, you can jump. So it's not that if you're liberated, you can't leave. But you're not going to be forced like a fall from the heavenly planets. Is there a reason why Hanuman has to stay on this earth? He wanted to. He wanted to stay on this earth and sing the glories of the Lord. That was his desire. Just like some devotees like to preach in prison. There are devotees who like to preach in prisons. It's not my personal thing, but there are devotees who really like to preach in prisons.
But Mother, yes, what you said is right, but then we don't see Hanuman, right? Because we are not that pure. But now whom is he teaching to?
I don't know. I know he met Bhima. I don't know. When you see him, you can let me know who he's teaching.
Yeah. Mother, your voice is breaking, Mother.
Yeah, the problem is that my upload speed is not so high on this system. So I have great download, but I don't have great upload, and the other system is down.
So we can do one thing.
I mean,
if you want, we can turn off our videos to improve your bandwidth speed.
That's not going to make any difference for you. No, it's not going to matter for me because my download is great and I'm downloading your videos.
Okay.
So that's not going to do anything. I mean, I'm uploading my video, but I'm downloading your videos. So that doesn't matter. Let me see if the other system is back up again. I can check on my phone and see if it's working because it's better. I have this system, which I pay something for every month, as an emergency backup. It's not working. The main system is not working. So I have to use this other system. What I can do is turn off my video. Does that help the audio if I turn off my video?
Please go ahead, Mother.
Does the audio get any better?
We will be knowing it.
We hear you clearly.
Well, are you hearing me? Is it clearer now when I have the video off?
So
Yes.
far.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
clear.
better.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to leave my video off. Yeah, the other system is just not, it's just not working. So I have great download speed, but I don't have great upload speed. What to do? At least I can get on, you know, hey. I'm grateful I have a backup system and I can get on. But it's one of those things where they assume you're going to be like downloading movies, but they don't assume you're going to be teaching. Okay, being liberated, one of the ways of being liberated is being in the Dham. That's one of the 5 ways of being liberated. And anybody can decide to leave the Lord's association, but you're not going to be forced to, like with ordinary karma. Okay. All right, when we read this one. The devotees who are attracted by the pastimes of the Lord in Gokula or Vrindavan are the topmost than those who are attracted to Dwarka. When Rupa says this, is he measuring in quantity? No. He's measuring in intimacy of rasa. Or there's more facility for intimate rasas with Krishna in Vrindavan than there are intimacies of rasas in Dwarka or Mathura. So that's all. That's the only thing it's measuring. Well, not only. Rupa Goswami explains in Ujjwala Nilamani that the devotees in Vrindavan, not all of them, but some of them, they only care about Krishna's pleasure. Whereas those in Mathura or Dwarka may sometimes still care about their own pleasure in relationship to service. And I actually find that very reassuring, that even devotees in Vaikuntha or in Dwarka or in Mathura may still have some concerns about their own happiness. It's like, all right, there are these devotees who are fully liberated in the spiritual world, but they may sometimes have some interest in their own happiness. But in Vrindavan, at least the gopis in Vrindavan, their happiness and Krishna's happiness are the same. They don't distinguish between their happiness and Krishna's happiness. So that's another way of measuring. What does it practically mean, always relishing the nectar of the lotus feet of the Lord, always having a happiness of being a servant, and always having the happiness of feeling close to Krishna? Why is a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead very rare? Because, well, they're not very rare on absolute platform. On the absolute platform, most living entities are devotees of the Lord. But in the material world and on the earth planet, it's unusual because most of us here are selfish. What is the best type of liberation? Shashank asked. Any of the four non-merging are all fine, but the devotee is mostly interested in just eternal service. It is stated getting initiated doesn't indicate we are finished. How do we know if we reach the goal or not? Very nice question. So this is explained in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, that just like when you eat, you feel satisfaction of your hunger, you feel nourishment, you feel full. So as we advance in bhakti, we should feel a disinterest in material activities, and we should feel satisfied in Krishna consciousness. In this chapter, certain principles used to discharge devotional service. Are we limited to only these to express devotional service? This is a very nice question, Shashank. And in one sense, yes, and in one sense, no, because we'll see that there's a quote. I think it's in, not sure where. It's in Nectar of Devotion, but I don't know if it's in the chapters we're doing today. It may be the ones we're doing next week. Quoting from the 11th canto, where it says that whether one is, or maybe it was one we did last week. Anyway, I can't remember whether it's, because I'm always working on presentation for the other weeks. So I don't remember which one it's in. But it's from the 11th canto, whether one is doing the activities of bhakti as given in the scriptures, or whether one's dedicating one's ordinary activities to Krishna, it's all considered bhakti. And when we have in the realm of service, service can encompass dedicating what we're doing in our ordinary life. Dedicating what we're doing, or it's supposed to be our activities in our ordinary life, which could be loosely categorized in Varna and Ashram. Our duties according to our livelihood, our career, our duties according to our stage of life, whether we're going to school, whether we're taking care of our family. When we dedicate those to the Lord, then those are also bhakti. And that includes almost everything. I mean, about the only things you can't do for Krishna are like breaking the four regulative principles. You can't be a mafia boss for Krishna. Sorry, that doesn't work. Any of you who want to be mafia bosses. You can't run a prostitution ring for Krishna. You can't run an alcohol shop for Krishna. You can't kill cows for Krishna. So, you can't do that for Krishna. You can't run a casino for Krishna. one time, I'll tell you guys a funny story. I don't have too much time to tell funny stories, but I'll tell you guys a funny story. So I was in Italy many years ago, and I was giving a class in the morning. I had the window open in the room where I was staying, and I had my backpack was sitting on the floor of my room. So while I was giving class, it poured rain, and the rain came into my room, and it got the bottom of my backpack wet. Now that was the backpack I would use for my computer, for my electronics. So you're not gonna, and I was traveling that afternoon. I think I had a flight at like 4 p.m. So I couldn't put my computer into that backpack. Now that was also the place where I kept my cash. And I was at the end of my travels in Europe. And what would happen when I travel is places would say that they would pay for my tickets, but I would usually buy the ticket and then they would give me back the money in cash when I came. So I had just been on a big tour of Europe, and so I had quite a lot of cash that was reimbursement for airline tickets. And, probably like a few thousand euros I had in this backpack. So I had a big pile of cash. And that became soaking wet, like absolutely completely. The money was completely wet. The backpack was wet. I had a flight that afternoon. So the devotees had a washing machine in the temple, but not a dryer. In most places in Europe, people don't have clothes dryers. They just hang up their clothes, unlike we Americans, where everybody has an electric clothes dryer or a gas clothes dryer. So I asked if there was any way we could find a clothes dryer. And so 2 of the devotees took me into town to a laundromat. And first we bought a mesh bag to put all the cash in. So then into the dryer, we put all the cash in this mesh bag, and we put the backpack and put it into the electric clothes dryer. So if you've ever gotten cash wet and then dried it, the cash gets all crinkled up. It doesn't dry flat. And there was a lot of cash. And so there was no way I could put it back it would have filled up the whole backpack. It was all a crinkled mess. So I had to get it all smooth, right? And you really had to do this like one bill at a time. Yadutama Prabhu, I'm not on video because I'm on a different internet system and my upload speed is low. So anyway, we needed to take each of these bills and smooth them out. So these 2 devotees with me. And I looked at either of them and I said, first I was trying to do it myself. And then I realized I wouldn't be able to do it myself. And I had to do it when there was no one else in the laundromat. You don't want to, in front of somebody else, be dealing with all this cash. I was trying to do it very quickly before the other people who were doing their laundry came back. And I said to these guys, these 2 devotees, 2 Prabhus, I said, I need someone to help me with this, but I want to make sure you're not envious. If you're going to ask somebody to take care of your money, you got to make sure they're not envious. So both of them said, no, we're okay. And one of them said, I'm a cashier. I deal with cash all day. I said, oh, okay. I said, what do you do? So we're there smoothing out all these bills. He said, I'm a cashier in a casino. So while we're smoothing out all these bills, any of you who know me know that I have my Urmila gets very heavy like a blowtorch switch. So I have that Urmila side. Any of you who know me well, I have the Urmila's becoming a thunderbolt blowtorch. So I got out my Urmila thunderbolt blowtorch persona and I just blasted this guy. I said, you can't work in a casino. You have to quit. I was really getting on his case. So anyway, we finished. It's still raining outside. We get back to the temple. And this one devotee gives me a donation of 100 euros, and I just considered it contaminated. I immediately just put it in the deity box. I thought, and I said to him, I'm not taking any money from your work. Anyway, a week later, he contacted me and told me that he had quit his job at the casino and that his wife worked there too and that she had quit. And a few days later, I got a letter from the temple president telling me that for months or years, the devotees had been trying to preach to these guys to give up working at the casino, and they had not been successful. And they were amazed that I was successful. And I decided that's why Krishna got my money all wet. so that I would have a reason to preach to this guy. Anyway, that's a little funny story. And another story I can tell you is about Namarasa Prabhu, who does a lot of his podcasts. I was staying at his family's home. He was, I think, 17 at the time when my mother was dying. They had an extra car. I mean, how many people have an extra car? They had an extra car and an extra bedroom. And so I was there for 3 weeks while my mother was at the end of her life. And during that time, Namarasa was offered a job at what we call in America a convenience store. And I said to him, don't take this job. I said, you'll be involved with breaking all 4 of the regulator principles. I said, because at this job, they're selling meat, they're selling contraceptives, they're selling pornography magazines, they're selling lottery tickets, and they're selling alcohol. I said, just don't take the job. And he was like, but I need the money. And anyway, he didn't take the job. And then he got a much better job. And just recently, he was reminding me of that, how he was so grateful that I told him, don't take this job. So that kind of thing you can't offer to Krishna. You can't express devotional service in that sort of thing. Of course, if you're forced, if someone kidnaps you and forces you into prostitution, you can still be a devotee. It's not like you can't be a devotee if someone's forcing you in some terrible situation, but voluntarily. Other than that, anything we do, we can offer to Krishna. Anything that's not sinful, we can offer to Krishna. We can express our devotional service through anything. Isn't that nice? Prabhupada said, Krishna consciousness is not narrow or stereotyped. Oh, what does it mean to be beyond liberation? Understand the transcendental form of the Lord. Well, liberation just means you're not affected by heat, cold, happiness, distress, honor and dishonor, fame and infamy. You see that you're not this body. You realize the body's just a machine. You realize that you're just the observer. So there's many contemporary persons who've achieved liberation and who have very nice descriptions, but they may not have realized the form of the Lord. I was reading from one of such people within the last month or so, and he was saying that when he achieved this liberation, he could just sense the beauty of God everywhere, but he didn't have a sense of the form of the Lord or devotional service. Oh, if devotional service is so rare, how can the Sankirtan movement be successful? Yeah. Manusyanam sahasresu kaschid yadati siddhayat tamapi siddhanam kaschimam veti tatvrtaha. Well, we can look at this many ways, that Lord Chaitanya he's in the mood of Radharani, who's just this 14-year-old girl who's like, yeah, give love to everybody. So there's something special going on right now, that even though it's normally very rare. That's one answer. Another answer is that even if only a small percentage of people on this planet become fully 100% Krishna conscious, the whole planet will change. And everybody will be engaged to some extent. So that's also part of an answer. Bhakti should have no tinge of philosophical speculation. Is this referring to pure bhakti? Okay, we will be talking about this. Yes, Prabhupada uses the word philosophical speculation in different ways. The idea is it's not covered by just Gyan divorced from bhakti. That it's important to explain. I'm hoping I can do this quickly. When we say Jnana Karma Anavrita, so one should not cover one's bhakti with Gyan and Karma and Yoga. In other words, we should not think that our bhakti is dependent on items of Gyan, Karma, and Yoga. That's different from Anya Bilasita Shunyam. Anya Bilasita Shunyam is there should be zero approaching the Lord for anything other than to please the Lord for the Lord's sake.
Can you give an example of Gyan covering bhakti?
Sure. But let's look at Anya Bilasita Sunyam first. So Anya Bilasita Sunyam is I'm trying to please the Lord just to please the Lord. I'm not trying to please the Lord to get something from him. And we'll be going over this a lot in chapter 4, that I'm not trying to please the Lord to get bhukti or mukti. Now, if I want bhukti or mukti, it's better to go to the Lord for them than to go to somebody else. But pure bhakti means I'm not going to the Lord for those things. Now, can you be in pure bhakti and still ask the Lord for those things? Yes, if that's not A, your primary reason for going to the Lord, and B, if you're aiming to be free of asking the Lord for such things. So impure bhakti or sakama bhakti is when the reason I'm worshiping the Lord is to get bhukti or mukti. That's my reason. I don't care about the Lord. It's just like, you know, you go to a shop to buy something. You're not going to a shop because you care about the owner of the shop. If they have something on sale, you rejoice. You don't care that they're losing money on the sale. It doesn't matter to you. What matters is what you're getting. So that's sakama, impure bhakti. Pure bhakti is I'm just pleasing you to please you. That, or at least I'm aspiring for that. I might still ask for something because I'm immature, but I know that that's not good. I'm asking with regret, and it's not my primary relationship. So that's kind of an absolute sunyam. They're really, I'm going to the Lord just to please the Lord. But Jnana Anavritam is different. It's not saying there cannot be any jnana. It's not saying there cannot be any karma, and it's not saying there cannot be any yoga. Jnana, karma, and yoga are all included in bhakti. But the processes of Jnana yoga, karma yoga, and Jnana yoga, karma yoga, and Jnana yoga, they should not be covering bhakti. So how we explain that they're covering bhakti? Like, let's say, and we're going to be looking at this in later chapters. I think it's in chapter 13. So Adipurusha Prabhu gave this example. So we want to have all these good qualities that are listed in the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam, all these divine qualities. Why do we want these qualities? The jnani wants these qualities so that they'll be liberated. The devotee wants these qualities so Krishna will be pleased. So let's say a person thinks, first I have to be liberated, and then I can be a devotee. And the way I'm going to be liberated is by Jnana Yoga, by developing all these good qualities. That's covering bhakti with Jnana. Or like we're going to be studying in the second class today in the 10 nivriti items, the 10 items do not. We're not supposed to lament in difficulty or rejoice in gain. So this is the being detached from happiness and distress, honor and dishonor, heat and cold kind of thing. So that's one of the items of bhakti. If we're being detached to please Krishna, it's one of the items of bhakti, but it's also an item of jnana. So, and the jnanis are detached through philosophical speculation. So they're looking at the happiness, distress, fame, infamy of this world, and they're saying this has nothing to do with me, I'm just the observer. They're using some sort of Sankhya yoga, and this way we become detached. Now we also do that, which can be called philosophical speculation, but we're doing it to please Krishna, not to become liberated. And again, if someone thinks, I'm going to become liberated first, this was Arjuna's question at the beginning of chapter 12 in Bhagavad Gita. If one thinks, first I have to become liberated, and then I can take up bhakti, and I'm going to be liberated through Jnana Yoga, through detachment, through philosophy. Or if someone says, I'm going to be liberated through Varnashram, and then I'm going to take up bhakti. That's covering bhakti with karma. And in fact, I just heard this from a devotee 2 days ago, a very scholarly devotee, in fact. He said, first you have to take up the rules of karma yoga, become expert in karma and piety, and then you can take up bhakti. That is covering bhakti with karma yoga. Now in bhakti, we're pious, I hope, but we're pious to please Krishna. Or if someone thinks, first I'm going to get liberated by doing Jnana Yoga, You know, first I'm going to control the ingoing and outgoing breath, and I'm going to raise the life air to the different chakras. You can do that in bhakti. You can meditate in bhakti. But if one thinks, first I'm going to meditate and then I can do bhakti, you're covering bhakti with yoga. This problem, or if you think bhakti is dependent, if I think my liberation is dependent on my mechanical detachment, my liberation is dependent on my piety, my liberation is dependent on the mechanics of my meditation, then you're also covering bhakti with karma, gyan, and yoga. Whereas if we understand it's my devotion to Krishna, that's the main thing. It's my devotion to Krishna, the same thing. You know, we talked about how the devotion is the primary, the Swarup Lakshana. Anukulena Krishnanu Shilanam Bhakti Rutaman. Anukulena Krishnanu Shilanam, that's the main thing. I'm trying to please Krishna, just to please Krishna, following in the footsteps of the acharyas who tell me how to please Krishna. That's the main thing. And that's what liberates me. That is what gives me satisfaction. As part of pleasing Krishna, Shilanam, activities. I've got to do activities which are going to be similar to material karma. In order to please Krishna, I've got to study the Shastras, which is going to involve philosophical speculation, but I'm doing that to please Krishna. As part of pleasing Krishna, I'm going to be detached from honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, but I'm doing that to please Krishna. As part of pleasing Krishna, I'm going to enter into a state of samadhi and meditate, especially on our Gayatri and our japa, but I'm doing that to please Krishna. My bhakti isn't dependent on those things independently, and my bhakti isn't covered by those things. I see a lot in ISKCON of people covering bhakti with Gyan, Karma, and Yoga. A lot. I see it very frequently. I see it just as frequently as I see the offenses. And it's very common. And it's funny, covering bhakti with karma was something that I'm seeing recently. Like only within the last maybe 5 years or so. It's not something I used to see a lot. But this whole emphasis on varnashram, that first we have to get, and I'm all in favor of varnashram. I'm writing a book on varna, for goodness sakes. But this idea that, you know, first we have to get our varnashram stuff together and then we can practice bhakti. And if you don't have your varnashram stuff together, you can't actually be practicing bhakti. So, you know, that's covering bhakti with karma. That's covering bhakti with karma. Or anyone who says you cannot think about Krishna until you're liberated. Don't think about Krishna while you're chanting until you're liberated. They are covering, but then how are you going to get liberated? Because we already talked about that thinking of Krishna is the beginning of sadhana bhakti. We already talked about that. Yes?
Hare Krishna, Mother Urmila.
Yes. Yes.
Quick question.
Yes.
I've heard various things about while we're chanting to not force yourself to think about Krishna, just focus on hearing the names, and naturally we'll think about Krishna. Is what you're saying is that we should try to think about Krishna, or is it you're talking about just kind of a day-to-day thing, or is that separate from chanting?
Well, it's a very interesting question, which would take a lot more time than we have to answer it. So I'm going to give you a short, probably unsatisfactory answer. So Srila Prabhupada would say that if you don't naturally think about Krishna while you're chanting, your chanting is inattentive. And he said this in, 1966 or 67. So Prabhupada said, as soon as we chant, we should feel the presence of Krishna and immediately remember Krishna's name and form. And if we don't, then our chanting is defective and inattentive. And he said, if we can't do that, then we should just hear the sound Hare Krishna. And there are places where Prabhupada says we shouldn't artificially engage the mind. And there's other places where Prabhupada says we should force the mind to think of Krishna. In one sense, sadhana bhakti means that there's the definition of sadhana bhakti, as opposed to bhava bhakti and prema bhakti, is that it's involving repeated practice and deliberate effort. That is what sadhana means. It is a deliberate practice. Even Raganuga sadhana bhakti, which is spontaneous practice, is still involves deliberate practice. Everything's only fully spontaneous at prema. And even then it involves deliberate activities, but they're not in the realm of practice. And all I know is any kind of practice that I'm aware of involves some amount of willpower. Even if it's spontaneous, even if I'm spontaneously attracted to doing something, there's still some degree of willpower involved if I'm doing something that I would call practice. You know, if I'm an expert cook, I'm not practicing anything. I'm doing some deliberate activities, but they're not practice. But if I'm not an expert cook, then there's a certain different kind of concentration that's used. You can see this in dancers. My daughter's a dance teacher. That for my daughter, she doesn't have to practice dance at all anymore. I mean, she may dance even when she's not performing to keep up her strength and stamina and her skills, but she's not practicing. So she's making a deliberate effort, but for her, it's entirely spontaneous. It's entirely motivated by the joy she gets of the service. And she doesn't have to focus on the individual skills in any way whatsoever. And so you see when she's dancing, she's entirely focused on the emotion and the dealings with Krishna. Whereas with some of her students who are not so expert, you can see that they're focusing on their motions and their movements. You can see it. They'll lose the facial expression of the emotion, and they'll be looking at the other dancers to see what they should be doing, or they're looking at their own body to see what they should be doing, because they're still at the stage of practice. So if we don't make any deliberate effort to think of Krishna, I don't see how we are ever going to get out of sadhana bhakti. Because the essence of sadhana bhakti is to always remember Krishna and never forget him. And Prabhupada says that the beginning of sadhana bhakti is the spiritual master gives us means to always think of Krishna. That's the beginning of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. So we are making deliberate attempts to think of Krishna and remember Krishna. We are supposed to be always doing that. So it makes no logical sense to me whatsoever if I am supposed to be always thinking of Krishna, that somehow when I sit down to chant Hare Krishna, I'm no longer supposed to be thinking of Krishna. That, to me, that is the most illogical and actually insane proposition. So I'm supposed to always think of Krishna except during my most focused, most concentrated, most essential spiritual practice. It's completely illogical. And if we think about, the fact that we can chant japa or kirtan in front of the deities and look at the deities, no one says, if you're having kirtan or japa in front of the deities, make sure you close your eyes and you don't look at the deities because, oh my God, you can't think of Krishna while you're chanting. Prabhupada said George Harrison could keep one picture of Krishna, and while he was chanting japa, he could look at the picture, and that would take care of his meditation. Prabhupada talks about that while chanting Hare Krishna, one can imagine, he uses the word imagine, one can imagine that one has a diamond throne in his heart and one is seating Krishna there and bathing him and so forth. Prabhupada consistently talked about just hearing the sound of the mantra as a second level. If you can't remember Krishna while you're chanting, then just hear the mantra. My own personal understanding of when Prabhupada's saying not artificial is for people who know nothing about Krishna. And therefore, when you say, think of Krishna while you chant, they'll do something crazy. And I had this realization once with a young man who was completely new to Krishna consciousness, and his idea of what Krishna was so weird. And I thought, if you tell this person, think about Krishna while you're chanting, who knows what he's going to be thinking about? So tell him just to chant in here. So that's my very short answer. I do have like lists of quotes and all kinds of stuff. Is it better to ask for association with the Lord or with the devotees? Is there even a difference? There really isn't a difference, but we like to be the servant of the servant of the servant. If you're with the devotees, you'll be with the Lord because they're with the Lord. Is it correct that in order to be engaged in pure devotional service, one must be liberated from material nature to an extent? Then why would we not pray for a spiritual body, or through the act of asking to only serve, does the Lord give us a spiritual body? Yes. Asking to only serve, we get a spiritual body. And we'll be going over this in the prayer section, which is next week. The different prayers where the devotee, once they realize their spiritual identity, they pray for their specific service. What is better to pray for, a service to the devotees or to the Lord? If I serve the devotees, I'm naturally serving the Lord. If I'm serving the Lord, I'm naturally serving the devotees. Unless one is already beyond liberation, one cannot relish the transcendental glories of the Lord. A neophyte who finds taste in hearing about the glories of the Lord, is he beyond liberation? Now, there's degrees. So a beginner is finding some taste, and a liberated person is finding the real taste. You know, it's like if you're sick, can you enjoy eating? Somewhat. You can't really enjoy eating till you're healthy, but you can enjoy eating somewhat when you're sick. I mean, it depends what you're sick with, I suppose. What does it mean to have taste for hearing about the glories of the Lord? Mahalakshmi, if anyone has taste for hearing about the glories of the Lord, it's you. How many classes do you go to a day? How many books do you read? Why are you even asking this question? I've hardly met anyone who has such a taste for hearing about the glories of the Lord as you do. You're practically speaking addicted, more than an alcoholic is addicted to alcohol. You hear the glories of the Lord much more than any alcoholic takes a drink of wine. That's your life and soul. By spiritual emancipation, I understand it to be liberation from material contamination. Is it so? Yes. What about being promoted to Dhruvaloka again? All different kinds of liberation. No, they're not. Dhruvaloka, yes. Indra told DT that those who abandoned all selfish desires. Indra's talking to DT, you know, instead of asking this question, what you could do is just look up the verse number in the Bhagavatam. Mahalakshmi, and if you look up the verse number in the Bhagavatam, you would see where it is. It's after Indra cut up the Maruts into many pieces, and then the Maruts were his brothers, and then Indra was talking to DT afterwards when they both became devotees. What is spiritual emancipation? Vijay Mehta, you'd have to give me the reference to know exactly, because it can mean different things. It can mean Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan.
Mother, I can give you the exact page number. I underlined it.
Instead of the page, all right, well,
Okay.
all right.
I can give you the chapter number and just a minute.
In different books, but give me the page number first.
Nectar of, yeah, I just underline. When I read, I underline it wherever I have a question, so I know where it is. Yeah. Now, this is page 38, and this is chapter 4.
38, let's see if that's my chapter 4.
It's on page 37 also.
38 is my chapter 3 in my edition that I have here.
Okay, so chapter 4, first paragraph itself.
Okay. I will, or the so-called spiritual emancipation. So this would mean Brahmajyoti.
Oh, okay.
This would mean merging into the Brahmajyoti.
Thank you so much, Mother.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. Indra does a lot of austerities, even after knowing Krishna. Why doesn't he have a change of heart? Every once in a while he does, but he doesn't seem to keep it. He doesn't seem to be able to maintain it. And I'm seeing this is somehow he just really wants lordship in the material world. What is bhakti? Bhakti is any kind of material enjoyment, any kind of enjoyment separate from Krishna. All right, now we're going to hope and pray that when I share the screen, my upload will be good enough. So I'm going to hope that my upload is good enough. And can you all see my screen clearly?
Yes, Mother.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm just going to keep the video off. And hopefully I've got good enough upload that this will work. All right.
You sound clear.
Very good. I'm so happy that I just was thinking a few days ago, why do I keep paying for this alternate system? I practically never use it. The temple system always works great. Maybe I shouldn't keep paying for it. And yeah. All right. So today I'm using it. All right. The devotion, relationship, nectar, ocean. Chapters 4 and 5. So the main points from chapters 4 and 5 is that all we need is attractant for Krishna. There's no other requirement. That means that nobody is greater or lesser qualified in any other way. And devotional service doesn't require anything, any help from anything else. If we just want pure devotion, everything else will be taken care of. All right, now the link to chapter 3. Chapter 4 is really, these chapters don't exist in the Nectar, in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu itself. So really, at the end of chapter 3, there were quotes about how devotees are free from bhukti and mukti, and chapter 4 is just simply more of the same. So just lots and lots and lots of quotes about how the devotees are not interested in bhukti and mukti. It's really what chapter 4 is. All right. So one way we know nectar devotion is authorized scripture. One way was given in the beginning, in the preface, where Srila Prabhupada talked about who Rupa Goswami is. Rupa Goswami's association with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which particularly tells us how nectar devotion is authorized scriptures for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. But Rupa Goswami himself extensively quotes from Shastra to back up all of his points. And we should follow that example. All right. I didn't include all of the verses here. I included summaries of the verses. So here's one from 5:14:44, that King Bharat had no attraction for material opulences or liberation. Now, of course, this was the first life. When King Bharat left his family, he's meditating on Surya Narayana. And of course, then he did end up getting attracted to a deer. But it was described when he gave up his kingdom, he had no desire for material opulences, which is bhukti, or liberation, which is mukti. Vitrasura, who externally, ostensibly appeared to be a demon, but he in his previous life had been Chitraketu. So in this life as a demon, apparently a demon, he says that he doesn't care whether he's in heaven, whether he has mystic power, or whether he gets liberation. He just wants service. He had a pretty unusual service as Vitrasura. And this conversation between Shiva and Sati is actually related to Vitrasura, because when Chitraketu had marveled that Shiva was preaching with Parvati on his lap, with Sati on his lap, Sati took this as an insult, and she cursed Chitraketu to become the demon Vitrasura. And Chitraketu was not disturbed. He accepted. If you want to curse me to be a demon, I accept, my dear mother. And she was amazed. If someone cursed me to be a demon, I would probably sit down and cry. But he didn't respond in any negative way. And so Lord Shiva said that the devotees of the Lord are not afraid of anything, because they've taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. For them, any position in the material world is as good as another. So we were just singing this morning in the temple. Kita Janmahai Jata Tubadash. I'm happy to be an insect if I can be your devotee. And I don't want to be Lord Brahma if I'm not your devotee. And then the story about Indra. So this is a fascinating part of the Bhagavatam. This is a part of the Bhagavatam that deals with people who are very, very selfish. So Diti had these two sons, Hiranyaka and Hiranyakashipu. She was told on the day she conceived them that they would be demons, that Lord Vishnu would kill them. And yet when they were killed, she blamed Indra. She said Vishnu killed them for the sake of Indra. And Indra was the son of her husband by another wife, by her co-wife, who was also her sister. So Indra was her stepson and also her nephew. But she decided she wanted to kill him as vengeance for her two sons being killed. And she did austerities with the idea of having a child who'd be able to kill Indra. Then Indra was serving her with the idea that he would mess her up and that this wouldn't work. And at one point, Indra, by mystic power, enters her womb and cuts her baby up into pieces, and then cuts those pieces up into pieces, cuts them up into 7 and the 7 into 7. And so there were altogether 49 Maruts who said, we are your brothers, we're not your enemy. And then all 49 were born. And at that point, Indra and Diti were no longer in enmity with one another. And Indra, speaking out of actual devotion, he says, devotees of the Lord know their own self-interest. They know that their interest is just to please the Lord. A very incredible story of rectification. And then Prahlad Maharaj is telling his schoolmates that because all of our desires are fulfilled, the devotee doesn't care about bhukti and mukti, because all the reasons for wanting bhukti and mukti are taken care of. You know, why do we want our material desires? Why do we want money? Why do we want health? Why do we want people to like us? And we want to be happy. And if we're unlimitedly happy, then we don't really care about any of these other things, because the reason for which we wanted these other things is taken care of. And the same with liberation. And the analogy is given, as given so many places, that if we feed the stomach, we satisfy the whole body. That if we please Krishna, anything else for which, the reasons for wanting anything else are taken care of. And we have the story of Gajendra. Gajendra had been a devotee Indrajumna, not the same Indrajumna involved with Jagannath. And in trance, he had not heard a great sage approach. The sage cursed him to become an elephant. As an elephant, he was being attacked by a crocodile, but he was able to remember his previous human birth. He was able to say the prayers from his previous human birth. And he asked the Lord to deliver him from the crocodile. And when the Lord actually came, Gajendra said something I find very significant. He said, I don't personally have experience of transcendental bliss. I'm fallen. But I know that you're pure devotees who are in transcendental bliss. They don't care about anything else because they're satisfied. Then the story of Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni was a great mystic yogi, partial expansion of Lord Shiva, and he had tried to kill the great devotee Ambarish, at which point the Lord Sudarshan Chakra chased him all over the universe. And finally, as a partial incarnation of Shiva, he was able to enter at least the edges of Vaikuntha. And he was asking the Lord, please release me from your Sudarshan Chakra. And the Lord told him, you have to go back to the devotee you offended. You have to go back to Ambarish and ask him for forgiveness. And the Lord speaks this to him. My pure devotees are always satisfied being engaged in devotional service. Therefore, they do not aspire even after the 5 liberated stages. You can know how little they care for material opulences. So he was telling Durvasa how great his devotees are. I mean, these descriptions can certainly increase our desire for Krishna consciousness. Wow. I'll get something so great that I won't care about anything else because I'll already feel like I have everything else. So the 5 kinds of liberation: to become one with the Lord, to live on the same planet as the Lord, to obtain the same bodily features as the Lord, to have the same opulences as the Lord, to have constant association with the Lord. And these are all, of course, liberations that would be achieved after leaving this body. We also have something called Jivan Mukta, where even though one is in this body, one is not affected by the modes of material nature. So the devotees never accept becoming one with the Lord because that would stop their service. They will accept the other 4 if it's part of their service, but they don't feel that they need them. Yes, do you have a question?
Yeah, Hare Krishna. When you say that the individual is not affected by the modes of material nature, does that mean just his soul is not affected, or does that mean his body is not affected as well?
Soul is never affected. And it doesn't mean, and the body is always affected. the body and mind are always going to be affected by the modes. The soul is never affected by the modes. So Jivan Mukta means, thank you for asking this clarification, that one is so much identifying with the soul that one is not affected by the fact that the body and the mind are affected. I've given some examples many times. Can you all still hear me?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay. So let's say you're walking through a shop that sells television sets. And when they're selling television sets, the way they sell them is they have some kind of something on the television set. There's some kind of movie or show or something on the television set. And as you're walking through this shop, you'll see, you know, somebody's doing something romantic, somebody's doing something heroic, somebody's doing whatever. But because you're not watching the show, there's no emotional effect. You're just walking past it. Or if I'm driving down the street and there's a car accident, but it doesn't involve anyone I know. So I'm not emotionally affected by the car accident. So it's like that. It's that the modes will affect the body and even affect the mind, but they never affect the soul. And when I start identifying fully with the soul, then the effect of the modes on the body and mind is like that. I'm aware that it's happening to some extent, but I don't feel that I have anything to do with it. Okay, here we have a prayer by the Nagapatni. Someone who could read this?
Yes. Dear Lord, the dust of your lotus feet is very wonderful. Any person who is fortunate enough to achieve this dust does not care for heavenly planets, lordship over all the planetary systems, the mystic perfections of yoga, or even liberation from material existence. In other words, anyone who adores the dust of your lotus feet does not care a fig for all other perfectional stages.
Thank you. So, you know, we might think the dust of someone else's foot, right? Who's going to value that? But when it's the dust from Krishna's feet, a devotee is so happy with this dust from Krishna's feet that they just don't care about anything else. Prabhupada gives the example of this prayer we sing as part of the Dhammadrastika, right? Varam deva moksha namoksha vanimva nachanyam vrineham varisharapiha. My dear Lord, you are the Lord of all, the giver of all benedictions, Vadadeva. I do not ask you for liberation or any material facility up to the point of liberation. What I want as your favor is that I may always think of your form in which I see you now as Damodar. You are so beautiful and attractive that my mind does not want anything besides this wonderful form. And Srila Prabhupada, Nectar of Devotion, tells the story of Damodar. Presumably he's assuming that people who read the Nectar of Devotion, which was a book published very early in ISKCON, it was pretty sure published in the 60s, would not be familiar with the story. So Prabhupada's telling the story of Damodar. There's a quote from the Hayashirsha Pancharatra where Hanuman says, my dear Lord, if you like, you can give me salvation from this material existence, of the privilege of merging into existence, but I do not wish any of these things. I do not want anything which diminishes my relationship with you as servant to master even after liberation. So that's why the devotees don't want to merge into the Brahmajyoti. Okay. Okay, Pavani, thank you for joining us. And Pavani, the next class is going to be really funny, so I hope you can listen online.
I will do that, Mother Urmila. It's pity I'll be missing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Tabaka was telling me when she taught chapters 6 through 8 to her students that they all had a great time. So I had a lot of fun making that presentation. So I hope you'll get to watch it.
I will definitely listen in with envy.
Well, watch it too. I have some really funny pictures in that one.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, and the Atmarama verse, which we've already discussed at length earlier in the Nectar Devotion, that even people who are liberated are attracted to Krishna. So again, showing that Krishna devotional service is above liberation. And we see devotees reject the idea of merging, but they may accept the other. Now, we had some questions about this, that devotees in Vrindavan are the purest because they're not interested even in Vaikuntha. In other words, they're interested in higher rasas. In Vaikuntha, a person may still have some desire for enjoying the opulences of the Lord, with the Lord, as service, but they may still want to enjoy the opulences of the Lord. In Vrindavan, they don't feel like that at all. So the devotees who are in this mood, they don't even care if they have to take birth again in the material world in service. And Prabhupada says some things that are very significant here. He says that in Vaikuntha, it may not be a person's ultimate destination. A person who goes to Vaikuntha, they may not be in their ultimate spiritual form. They might end up being attracted to Krishna and moving from worshiping Vishnu to worshiping Krishna even in Vaikuntha. So that's very significant. At the same time, let's say that is someone's eternal form. Let's say someone has an eternal form in Vaikuntha, or they have an eternal form with Ramachandra or with Nrsingadev. So just because attachment to Krishna is higher in one sense, that doesn't mean that those who are attracted to other incarnations are lower. And the example is given. Hanuman, that he knew there was no difference between Ram and Krishna, but he was particularly attracted to Ramachandra. He didn't want to give his devotion other places. So Prabhupada sometimes in ecstasy says, only be attracted to Krishna, because that's his own flavor. But pure devotional service can mean attraction to any of the Lord's forms. This nice lecture where Prabhupada says that Krishna is within the palm of a devotee. He likes to be conquered by his friends. He likes to be conquered by his friends. So if God is under our control in love, why would we want anything else? All right, chapter 5. Now the links to chapter 3 and 4, chapters 3 and 4 explained what makes one eligible for bhakti. We just have to have an attraction without selfish motive. But this lenient requirement is unique to bhakti. It doesn't apply to the other kinds of yoga. So for the other kinds of yoga, you may have to have a pious birth. You may have to be purified through prayaschitta, which means atonement, or you may have to execute varnashram dharma. So these are the three categories of chapter 5. These are the three categories of chapter 5. These are the three categories of chapter 5, where Rupa Goswami is going to look at each of these and say, you don't need them for bhakti. You don't need pious birth for bhakti. You don't need prayaschitta for bhakti. You don't need varnashram for bhakti. It's independent, it's self-sufficient. So usually to practice self-realization, you have to have pious birth, purification, and varnashram dharma. But devotional service is the natural position of the soul. So the essence of this chapter is what are not qualifications. So chapters 3 and 4, were about what are qualifications. Chapter 5 is what is not a qualification. Okay, and Rupa Goswami is again giving lots of evidences. Bhagavatam 126. Bhakti cannot be checked by any material circumstances. It's open for all without any distinction. It is the constitutional occupation of the living entities. So let's look at birth first. Remember, birth, prayaschitta, varnashram. Birth, prayaschitta, varnashram. Those are the three not qualifications. Okay, so you don't need a pious birth. Because pious birth means we did pious activities in another life. So bhakti makes us pious. We don't need a pious birth. Then Prabhupada gives an example of the Nityananda Vamsa. Can someone read this, please?
A class of priestly persons claim to be the descendants of Nityananda, calling themselves the Goswami caste. They further claim that the practice and spreading of devotional service belonged only to their particular class. which was known as Nityananda Vamsha. In this way, they exercised their artificial power for some time until Sarla Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the powerful Acharya of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, completely smashed their idea. There was a great hard struggle for some time, but it was turned out successfully, and it is now correctly and practically established that devotional service is not restricted to a particular class of men. Hare Krishna.
And Prabhupada's continuing this, which reveals his own mission. Someone who can read this?
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada's mission. Anyone can now become a Gaudiya Vaishnava from any part of the world or any part of the universe. Anyone who is a pure Vaishnava is situated transcendentally, and therefore the highest qualification in the material world, namely to be in the mode of goodness, has already been achieved by such a person. Our Krishna consciousness movement in the Western world is based on the above mentioned proposition of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada, our spiritual master.
Well, this is very important. And this is, again, not being covered by karma. That you don't have to have a particular birth in order to take up bhakti. This is very related to jnana karma anavrita, not being covered by karma. And how is this explained? Here he's giving a reference in the Padma Purana that anybody can take bath in the river in the winter. Now, not everybody will take bath in the river in the winter, but anybody can. So anybody can take up bhakti. And here's an example that people of impious birth who start to follow Vaishnava Dharma become even more purified than the highest born Brahmanas. It makes us qualified. There's this very famous verse that's quoted in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, quoted by Srila Prabhupada. Yata kanchanatam yati kamsyam rasa vidan ataha tata diksha vidanena dvijat tvam jayate nirnam. Just as bell metal attains kanchanata, goldness, similarity to gold, by following the procedures of alchemy. Similarly, by following the procedures of diksha, dvijat twa, dvijatness, similarity to twice-born individuals, is produced by humans. So this is a verse quoted quite often by Srila Prabhupada and Rupa Goswami, that the process of taking diksha, taking initiation, this particularly would refer to the Gayatri Diksha, it transforms our bodies. Just like if you know alchemy, you can take bell metal and make it into gold. So you can take the body of a low-born person and turn it into the body of a high-born person by diksha. Now that doesn't mean it's just a ceremony. If after taking diksha, we go out and drink alcohol and go to the casino, then we become fallen again. So we have to actually follow the process of diksha. All right, that was talking about high birth. A high birth is not a qualification. Now we're going to go to Prayaschitta, the second topic of chapter 5. Prayaschitta is not a qualification. Prayaschitta is doing things to atone for sinful activities. So we don't have to have a birth that's a result of past pious activities, and we don't have to do penance to atone from sinful activities. So most of us have some sort of sinful reactions. So generally, in order to get rid of our sinful reactions, we have to do some sort of atonement, some sort of penance. But bhakti is not dependent on these. Bhakti is itself the best penance. So why is that? Because bhakti means I'm getting to the root of why anyone would perform sin. The root of sin, Prabhupada already has defined elsewhere that sin means disobedience to the Lord. All these other things are just symptoms. I've shown my disobedience to the Lord by stealing, or I've shown my disobedience to the Lord by adultery, or I've shown my disobedience to the Lord by taking intoxication. Those are symptoms. of the mentality of disobedience. But once I again connect with the Lord, then everything is automatically rectified. I don't need to do some external means of rectification. Devotional service itself is purified. And you could say, well, suppose even after taking up devotional service, somebody does something wrong. And this happens, that even after taking up bhakti, a person may have some kind of fall down into sinful activities. Do they then need to take up a separate process of atonement? And the answer is no. They just have to take up devotional principles. The devotional life is not dependent on gyan and karma. It's not, you don't have to be purified by anything else. It in and of itself is purifying. Now, of course, let's say I've offended a devotee. I need to go to that devotee and ask for forgiveness, but that's part of the process of life. So, and as always, Rupa Goswami gives Shastric evidence. So in 11:21:2, it says that all we need is devotional service, and bhakti is not dependent on anything else. Okay, third topic of chapter 5 is Varnashram Dharma. Do we need to follow Varnashram Dharma in order to take up bhakti? Now, generally, before you take up Karma Yoga, Gyan Yoga, or Dhyan Yoga, you'd have to take up Varnashram Dharma. But it does not apply in bhakti. Varnashram Dharma is meant to bring us to the platform of seeing that we're Krishna's servant. Once I've already seen I'm Krishna's servant, I do not need to follow Varnashram Dharma for purification. Now, I'm still going to do my activities in this world, most likely. I'm still going to do something to earn a living. I'm still going to do something to go to school or take care of my family, which would be activities in Varnashram, and I can offer them to Krishna, but it's my offering them to Krishna that's purifying me, not the activities themselves. And here we have this nice quote, that even if one does not execute his specific occupational duty, but immediately takes direct shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, there will be no fault on his part, and in all circumstances, his position is secure. And Rupa Goswami gives many, many quotes to this effect. So even if in terms of Varnashram, our life is a mess, you know, sometimes you have people, they've been divorced 5 times, and they've changed career another 10 times, and they're from a Varnashram situation, their life is a mess. It doesn't matter. They can still take up bhakti. All right. We have ended early, which is very good because actually our next class, I might want to start. I might want to have a longer next class. So I'm going to kind of change time of the break. Anybody have any questions at all on 4 and 5 that we haven't answered? Yes, Supriya.
You talked about the Vishnu forms when I was asking about how can a devotee of other, say for example, somebody is a devotee of Rama or Hanuma or Narayana, then they go to the Vaikuntha and then suddenly they can also develop affection for Krishna and go to Krishna Loka. So can you please clarify, explain more about that, how it happens? Like, kind of.
All right, well, it could be one of 2 things. Let's say a person is attached to Vishnu, and that's their eternal attachment, and they're not interested in Krishna or Ram. They're just interested in Vishnu. Then they can stay in the Vaikuntha eternally. But it could be that someone's interest in Vishnu is a stage. And once they hear about Krishna or Ram, they might not hear about Krishna until they're already in Vaikuntha. They might not hear about Krishna while they're in the material world. Then they become interested. And they gradually come up to their eternal position in Krishna Loka or in Ayodhya. So that depends on the individual. But it's interesting that even in Vaikuntha, one might make further progress. Is that clear?
No, if somebody has reached the Vaikuntha, then how they also read, maybe they also know about more about Krishna from there, or I'm just trying to.
Yes, yes. There's a nice story by Sanatana Goswami called Brihad Bhagavatamrita of how Gopakumar goes to Vaikuntha, and the residents there know about Krishna, but most of them are not so interested in worshiping the Lord as Krishna. They're interested in worshiping the Lord as Vishnu. But Gopakumar does go from Vaikuntha to Ayodhya to Dwarka to Vrindavan. Anything else? Sure, this is very good questions. Any other questions on chapters 4 and 5?
Yes,
Yes, Mahalakshmi.
because I was trying to paste, but I didn't do it right. So when Indra is praying to Lord Nrsimhadev, he mentions that because Hiranyakasipu has been removed, is being killed, then Indra says, now within our hearts there is a peace again.
Right.
Since the hearts again. Now, now we have played, no, he says.
Now we have placed you within our hearts again. Before we were just thinking about Hiranyakashipu. Now that he's dead, we can think about you.
So, but fear is an impetus for taking the Lord to heart. So it seems contradictory, because if there is fear of Hiranyakasipu there.
That's because you're a greater devotee than Indra.
So the demigods, when they have fear, instead of taking shelter of Krishna, they flee, they go away. Is that what happens?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this has happened to you. It's certainly happened to me. That sometimes if I'm in a lot of anxiety about something, all I can think about is the thing I'm in anxiety about. And it's very difficult to think about Krishna because the anxiety is so great.
It's true, yes.
So maybe that has happened to you sometimes. It has certainly happened to me.
Yeah.
That, there's some difficulty in life, some problem. And I, it's not that I forget about Krishna, but I become so absorbed in the problem that it's very difficult to just meditate on Krishna. So this is what was happening to the demigods. For great devotees, all these things are impetus just to go in deeper meditation. So the demigods are not at that platform.
Thank you.
I mean, if you think about like Uttara, when Uttara is being attacked by the Brahmastra, she's certainly very much concerned about her embryo, her child. At the same time, she's fully absorbed in Krishna, so it doesn't drive out the thought of Krishna like it may do for someone like us.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for bringing it up. Anybody else? Anything for chapters 4 and 5?
Thank you so much for this explanation, what you gave to Mother Mahalakshmi's question, because for me, like for this allergy season and my toddler kind of taking over all my consciousness, I rarely can think about Krishna anytime. I just think where I am living nowadays. So I was kind of feeling frustrated.
Well, also, I've given this analogy before, and that is that let's say you are having a conversation with somebody. Let's say you're standing on a street, on a sidewalk, and you're having a conversation with somebody, and then some huge truck passes by, makes a lot of noise. So your conversation may be interrupted while the truck is passing by. Then after the truck has passed by, you can resume your conversation. Or we used to have a home many years ago. We lived down the street from where I'm staying now, and the train went through the backyard. So if you were sitting outside, I had a very funny situation. I was sitting outside on the deck with some devotees visiting from California. So we're sitting and talking, and while we were talking, the train went by. And it was so loud, we had to stop the conversation. And as soon as the train went by, we picked up the conversation, and they looked at me and they said, "Do you always remain so calm during an earthquake?" And I said, "That wasn't an earthquake, that was a train." But my point is that sometimes a disturbance in this world is so great that our normal ability to meditate on Krishna becomes temporarily disrupted. And this happens even with great devotees, like with Maharaj Yudhisthira after the battle. He was in so much grief that all these people had died, and he was feeling so much guilt and so much grief that he basically couldn't function. So we also need to be kind to ourselves. You know, sometimes there's a trauma we're going through that is so great, it is so noisy, it is so overwhelming that we don't give up our chanting, we don't give up our service, but we just become so disturbed that we're not really able to function for a while until we deal with that very strong emotion. And once we've dealt with that strong emotion, once we've let that pass through us, and once it's not quite so overwhelming, then we're more able to process. So we should be kind to ourselves like that. That there may be some great disturbance that just, becomes overwhelming. And then we can kind of step back and say, all right, this is a train passing through, and I'm just going to try to hold on while it passes through, and I'll pick up my normal relationship after it passes through. But another thing we can do, especially if it's prolonged, if we're going through some difficult time, it is one of the processes of bhakti, and we'll be discussing this in our next class, about being detached from happiness and distress and honor and dishonor and heat and cold and pain and pleasure. So we'll be discussing this in our next class, and how we're going to do that, and how that is a part of bhakti. So we have a lot to cover in the next class. I think what I'd like to do, it's 5 minutes early, is I'd like to end now, take a 15-minute break, and start the next class 5 minutes early. Give us an extra 5 minutes in the next class, because we really do have a lot to go through with chapters 6 to 8. So I hope that is fine. Thank you for tolerating that I just had audio. And give yourself a real 15-minute break. Get up, drink some water, take a walk, stretch, chant some Hare Krishnas, and we'll see you in 15 minutes. I'm so sorry that I forgot to turn on the recording. For those of you listening to the recording, I apologize. I just turned it on now. There are certainly instances where we may feel that someone else's happiness is our happiness. That if I see my child happy, then that is my happiness. If I see my spouse happy, my parent happy, my friend happy, that is my happiness. My dog even. If my dog's happy, I feel happy. So we have that experience. You'll see that with people walking their dogs. You walk past them, and if you say, wow, that is a gorgeous dog, they're happy. Or their dog is running and playing and catching a ball, and they're happy to see their dog happy. So we all have a sense like this, that the happiness of another is our happiness. We don't have a happiness independent of their happiness. And it doesn't have to even be a happiness where they're pleased with us directly. I can just see that my child is playing happily, and I don't have to take any credit for it at all. There doesn't have to be anything selfish in it at all. Or my youngest great grandson is just really started walking, and he'll be so happy that he can walk. So I don't have anything to do with that. It's not like I'm getting some indirect selfish happiness out of it. I didn't contribute to that. It's his accomplishment. But I feel happy seeing his happiness. So the devotee feels happy upon seeing Krishna's happiness. That's it. And if they're the catalyst for Krishna's happiness, then they're even happier. If Krishna's happy because of the flower I gave him, that's my perfection. And that is not selfishness. That is bhakti. Excellent. Krishnadas Kaviraj deals with this very nicely in Adi, pretty sure it's Adi 3. And he brings up this exact doubt. Okay, we already got Shashank's question for number 6. For chapter 6, you already asked in the beginning. Is it possible to obtain liberation without following in the footsteps of the acharyas? Yes, one can get Kripa Siddhi directly from Krishna. That is, however, very rare. Are some offenses much more severe than others? Yes. Are all the offenses equally as bad? No. How do we repent for any sins committed? Is it simply asking for forgiveness if we've offended someone? Yes. Yes, Mahalakshmi. You have to unmute. You have to unmute.
This question about Kripa that could, well, nothing that I am going to see, but if one does something that Krishna, there is nobody who knows that, nobody knows, but Krishna might, well, Krishna knows everything. How is it caused, Kripa Siddha? Krishna Siddha, Kripa, Krishna Kripa.
There isn't a cause. That's the whole point.
Okay. Okay.
The whole point. I mean, Krishna may decide to give the mercy of bhakti to somebody. That's, that's explained in the first canto. Bhakti is independent. A devotee may choose to give bhakti to someone. I mean, it's the opportunity for bhakti, obviously. The person has to take it. But Krishna may choose, because bhakti is of the nature of the soul, it's already there. If someone has a desire for it, then Krishna can deal with him directly. He doesn't usually he deals through his devotees. So it's not that we should think, well, I don't need to follow the acharyas, I'll just invent my own system and be sincere and Krishna will appear. And that's actually evidence that we're not sincere. I got all the acharyas in front of me and I could follow their example, but just out of laziness or rebelliousness, I'm just not going to and figure Krishna will come because bhakti is independent. Then I'm never going to get bhakti. But let's say you're someplace where you don't know of any previous acharyas. It isn't available to you. And you're just like, Lord, whoever you are, whatever you are, please come and save me. He just might. The difference between item 35 and 44.
I have one question, Mataji.
Can you tell me, what is 35 and 44? Because otherwise I have to look it up here.
Mother, 35 is saying that we should reside in Vrindavan, Dwarka, Mathura. And then 44 again says that we should live in Mathura.
Okay, I'm pretty sure. When do we discuss that?
This is chapter 6, yeah. Important items.
I'm pretty sure we'll discuss that when we go next week. Pretty sure that we'll look at those things next week. So if you can ask that again next week.
Okay, Mother, thank you.
Why are Amalaka trees sacred? I have no idea. Been wondering that for decades. What does it mean one should not break silence while worshiping? Generally, when we're doing puja, we shouldn't be talking to people at the same time. Again, I'm dealing with Krishna and I should be focusing on Krishna. One should not offer obeisance silently. The pranam mantras to the guru we should be saying out loud when we're offering obeisance. All right, we have a great show for you today. I had so much fun making this PowerPoint, this one and the next one. In fact, I had too much fun, which is why I got so behind. Which is why I got so behind in correcting exams. I was just having a ball making these PowerPoints. It was totally enjoyable. And I didn't care about doing anything else. I was neglecting so much of my other service making these particular PowerPoints. I just had so much fun. So I hope that you enjoy them now that I'm getting back to my other stuff. So Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Devotion, Relationship, Nectar, Ocean, chapters 6 to 8. So chapters 6 through 12 are a new section. They're the 64 Angas of Bhakti. So chapter 6 is just a list, and 7 through 12 expands on the list. So we have the 64 Angas, and this is the way they're organized. Chapter 6 is just a list. Chapter 7 is 1 through 18. Chapter 8 is just about 19. Chapter 9 is 20 through 42. Chapter 10 is 43 through 46. 11 is 47 through 54. And 12 is 54 through 64. So in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu itself, you don't have these chapters. So the first 10 are primary regulative principles. 11 through 20 are secondary, and 21 through 64 others. And this is how they're organized. So the 64 items of sadhana bhakti, there's 20 items of primary importance. 1 through 10 are what to accept, 11 through 20 what to avoid. Then there's 44 additional items, 21 through 59 are just additional items, and 60 through 64 are the 5 most effective items. Items. An important point that Prabhupada mentions, that Rupa Goswami is mentioning principles, not details. So for example, a principle is you accept a guru, but exactly how you follow that instruction is a detail. One guru may give one instruction, a different guru may give another instruction, or one guru may give different instructions to different disciples. So this is expanded on Shilanam. Shilanam, remember, was activities of the body, mind, and speech, positive pravritti and negative nivritti. A side note, pravritti and nivritti can mean other things in other places. Sometimes pravritti marg can mean the path of sense gratification, and nivritti can be the path of renunciation. That's not how they're being used here. They're being used here as what you should do and what you should not do. So things to do, pravritti. This strengthens our foundation. Things to avoid, the foundation will break. So 1 to 10 make the foundation strong, 11 through 20 make the foundation weak. So together, 1 through 20 build the foundation of sadhana bhakti. So Prabhupada, then we have, among these first 10, what's most important? Somebody read this, please.
Altogether, Srila Rupa Goswami mentions 20 items, and all of them are very important. Out of 20, the first 3, namely accepting the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, taking initiation from him, and serving him with respect and reverence are the most important.
All right, those are the most important. Then we have the most potent, the most effective. Worshipping the deity, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, associating among devotees, Sankirtan, living in Mathura, living in a holy place. That will be discussed in chapters 12 and 13 extensively. And these items include everything of body, mind, and speech. And these can be analyzed. We are not going to analyze these, but they can be analyzed like this. We have the first 10, the most important are shelter of a guru, take diksha and shiksha, serve the guru. Then 10 prohibitions of the 44 angas. 11 involve the whole body, 5 involve the voice, 2 involve taste, 1 involves smell, 1 involves touch, 2 involves sight, 1 hearing, 9 the mind. Then serving things related to the Lord are 4, mixed 3, and then the 5 most important ones, or the 5 most potent ones actually are repeated. 5 most prominent, serving the deity, the Shastra, association with devotees, the holy name, and living in Mathura. That's it for chapter 6, it's just a list. All right, chapter 7. So we're gonna have here the first 18 items of devotional service are in chapter 7. So the 10 most important things to do, and the first 8 most important things not to do. So of the first 10 important things to do, the 3 are most important. Why? Because without Guru, we can't do anything else. Guru is introducing us to everything else. So number 1, accepting the shelter of the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master. This is the most foundational. Guru tells us how to follow everything else. We can't access anything else without it. All right? And what does this mean to take shelter? To understand the futility of sense gratification, become frustrated with it, give up our dreams for happiness and material life, and to accept transcendent guidance. And who is a bona fide spiritual master? Realize the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and arguments, and thus be able to convince others of these conclusions. And you may recognize this is the same qualification of the most eligible to take up Vaidhi Bhakti. Having firm knowledge and faith in the Shastra, and being able to convince others, and being able to control the 6 kinds of sense gratification. All right, now after we have the shelter of a guru, we take Diksha. We take Diksha and we learn from the guru how to do devotional service. So after we find a bona fide guru, item 1, we accept the guru as the representative of Krishna, we get faith, then we express that faith in Diksha. Then we follow the guru's instructions with faith and devotion. So we've gotten the guru's instructions in item 2. We offer service, we take initiation instruction. Then in item 3, I apply that knowledge. All right, those are the 3 most important. Shelter of a guru, Diksha from a guru, doing what the guru says. Diksha from a guru and instructions. Shelter of a guru, initiation instructions from the guru, and I'm following instructions. Most important, that sets the foundation for everything else. Following the footsteps of great acharyas under the direction of the spiritual master. Carrying out devotional service in a manner that follows the example of the previous acharyas. Right? Remember, this was also in Nectar of Instruction. And this is part of the Anukulyena part of the definition of bhakti. And the guru has to follow the acharyas. That's one way we know whether or not the guru is bona fide. You know, we can understand the acharyas through the guru, but we also understand the guru through the acharyas, both. We learn about this in hermeneutics. We understand about the acharyas through the guru, and we understand about the guru through the acharyas. Both are the same. And the example is given of Buddha. So even though Buddha is the Lord, because he's not following the acharyas, he's not considered a bona fide guru, and one is not doing bhakti by following him. Very, very, very important verse that Rupa Goswami quotes. Shruti smriti puranadi pancharatrika vidin vina atankita harer bhaktir utpatyaiva kalpate. That if we try to do bhakti without reference to the scriptures, Shruti, Smriti, Purana, it just causes a disturbance. If we're going to make up our own process of bhakti that's not based on the scriptures, all we're going to do is cause a disturbance. We can think about, for example, the men who dress up like gopis. This is my bhakti. It's just a disturbance. All right. Asking questions of the guru. I mean, not that I'm your guru, but this is why we have you ask questions in the Bhakti Shastri class. It's one of the most important items of devotional service, is asking questions. Being prepared to give up anything for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. How do we have the faith to do that? Because we're convinced that making Krishna happy will more than compensate for whatever material thing we give up. And not that we have to give up all of our material comforts, but if necessary to satisfy Krishna, we will do that. I think we do that in our ordinary family life. We give up our comforts for our spouse, for our children, for our parents, and so forth. Living in a holy place. Now, obviously, we're not going to move every member of the Hare Krishna movement to Vrindavan or Dwarka. We would damage the ecosystem. But we bring Vrindavan, we create places of pilgrimage all over the world. All of the temples are holy places. We create a holy place in our home. It's not exactly the same. It's like an embassy of a country is considered part of the country, but basically it is the same. This is a very interesting one, accepting only what is necessary or dealing with the material world only as far as necessary. So not getting entangled very much in the world any more than we have to. But Srila Prabhupada explains this in terms of our spiritual practice. Prabhupada says, don't take vows that you can't keep. Don't say, I'm going to chant 64 rounds if you can't do it. Because if we take vows we can't keep, we'll break our vow, and also we'll become discouraged. So to make realistic vows to progress in Krishna consciousness at a pace that we can maintain. I've seen a lot of devotees have spiritual fall down because they push themselves to do more than they can do in the name of surrender. But look, this is one of the 10 most important items of devotional service, is to endeavor comfortably. We want to push ourselves. We don't want to just be comfortable. At the same time, we don't want to go into a panic and overextend ourselves.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
Would you say that over endeavoring, kind of what we were is going back to Nectar of Instruction too, would that kind of influenced by the material modes like Rajagun and stuff?
Absolutely.
That it's not always a spiritually motivated thing?
Absolutely.
Can you spiritually over endeavor? Like if you're actually like surrendering, when Krishna protects, seems like Krishna would protect you in that way.
Nope.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It's always pride. Always pride. And the results are always bad. I mean, all right, there are emergency situations on a very temporary level. I mean, there are emergencies where we may have to, for a brief period of time, push ourselves beyond our actual normal capacity. But that should be brief and rare. There are emergencies, but we shouldn't be living in a perpetual state of emergency. It's harmful even to our physical body. It's harmful to our physical body, to our mind, to our relationships with everyone. And it really displeases Krishna to do that. We're meant to be balanced. Krishna says those who are balanced in eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all pains by practice of the yoga system. And it's an important anga of devotional service to do what we can do and not to try to do more than we can do. Again, we want to try to go forward. We want to try to push ourselves out of our comfort zone and learn more and advance more, but not in a way that's going to stress the system such that we get physically or psychologically ill, or that we get even spiritually ill. That doesn't please Krishna at all. We're thinking maybe that it's all pride. It's all pride. Observing fasting on Ekadasi and worshiping Prabhupada says sacred trees like the Tulsi, of course. Actually, it says the Amalaki. And again, I have no idea why Amalaki. All right. So this is one comment by our acharyas is that the idea is that we're supposed to have a respectful attitude towards banyan trees. Again, I don't know why banyan trees, Tulsi, brahmanas, and cows. So this last item of the 10, and it's interesting, it's in the 10. It's in the 10 most important, is a general attitude of respect. Now, this is not about actions. It's just a general attitude of respect. All right, now we're going to the top 10 top do nots. top do nots.
Then I have a quick question.
Yes.
Are the Amlakas trees same as the banyan trees?
Oh my goodness. I have been asking these questions for years. I don't know.
Yeah, because if it's banyan tree, then we know, because Radha and Krishna used to sit under the banyan tree, and Krishna used to groom Radharani's hair and decorate with flowers.
But they also sit under the malati vines. They also sit under the kadamba trees. So why the banyan trees? Sorry, I really have not found a decent answer to this question. Good try. Don't know. Okay, let's go to the do nots. Give up the company of non-devotees. So this again doesn't mean ordinary dealings at work and so forth and going to the store, but to have them as our intimate associates. So we can think of different categories of non-devotees: atheists, mundane religionists, impersonalists. So we don't want these people as our primary companions. Sometimes we can't avoid it. Sometimes they may be intimate family members that it's hard to get away from. Not to instruct people beyond what they're willing to hear. This is also, of course, related to preaching to the faithless for the offense against the holy name. And this is also, it's a pride problem. If I try to instruct someone who doesn't want to hear something, it's because I'm prideful. It's a lack of respect for the other person, and it may cause the other person to commit offenses. I can try to bring them up to the point where they want to hear. I can try to do that, but I shouldn't try to force. So not being enthusiastic about constructing costly temples. So a number of you asked, why did Srila Prabhupada want to create costly temples? I mean, the question can be raised, why did Rupa Goswami make the pure stone, solid stone, Radha Govinda temple? So a devotee may engage rich and passionate people in constructing big temples for preaching, but personally, they're not particularly interested. The same can be said with books. One should not try to read too many books or develop the idea of earning his livelihood by lecturing on or professionally reciting Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's not that these activities are forbidden. We have, bringing Krishna consciousness to those who aren't already interested, constructing costly temples, living by preaching, and studying many books. It's not that these are forbidden, but one has to be very careful with all of these. One has to be very careful about preaching to non-devotees, about constructing big fancy buildings, and about becoming a big scholar, because all of them can involve pride. So one can do them in service, but one has to be very, very careful with all of them. One should not be neglectful in ordinary dealings. So this is also a very interesting anga of bhakti, that Krishna wants us to take care of things in the world. Otherwise, it looks bad for him if his devotees are not decent people. And this particularly applies to money. We should take proper care of things that have to do with money. We shouldn't be neglectful of keeping proper accounts, dealing with money honestly, following the law, and so forth. Okay, now I want to spend a little bit of time on this. We talked about this in the first class as far as not covering bhakti with gyan. And it's interesting that this is an anga of bhakti, and it's in the first 20 items of what's most important. So not being under the spell of lamentation and loss or jubilation and gain. Now, in and of itself, this is an item of Gyan. This is an item of Gyan Yoga. This is one of the main spiritual techniques of the Gyan yogis. So we're not engaging in this technique for liberation. We're engaging in this technique to please Krishna. Now, this is not the only place Krishna says it, but if we look at Bhagavad Gita 12:13 through 19, where Krishna's talking about what pleases him, and we see this repeated: equal in happiness and distress, equipoise in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety, neither rejoices nor grieves, neither laments nor desires, equipoised in honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, again, 3 times, fame and infamy. It pleases Krishna when we learn to be detached from these things in this world, when we learn to be the observer, when we neither hate nor desire, we learn to be the observer. Oh, it's pollen season right now where I am, and therefore I'm sneezing, my body's sneezing and my body's going through misery. Look at that. That's interesting. How interesting. Not becoming absorbed in it and just wanting it to go away. Just being the observer, letting the happiness and distress of this world pass through us without trying to either enjoy it or stop it. Just letting it be, remaining neutral. Krishna is very pleased when we do that with his material energy. One should not disrespect the demigods. So we're not meant to worship them as independent gods, but we are supposed to work in cooperation with them. They are also devotees of the Lord. This is a big one, not giving unnecessary trouble to any living entity. This is an anga of bhakti. This is an anga of bhakti. I was once in a rickshaw with my friend Srimati in Vrindavan, and the rickshawwala had to go up a hill. So he was getting out of the rickshaw and he was pulling it with us in it, and she immediately got out. She said, one should not give unnecessarily trouble to any living entity. Just by living, we're giving trouble to so many living entities, but we shouldn't do it unnecessarily. We shouldn't give anyone any trouble unnecessarily. Of course, this involves meat eating, which is definitely unnecessary trouble. Okay, chapter 8 is just on the 19th item, carefully avoiding the various offenses and chanting the holy name of the Lord or worshiping the deity. That's all. So we have here 32 offenses from the Vedic literature, others from the Varaha Purana, and then 10 offenses against the holy name. You will need to know this for your exam, these topics. So offenses against the name and the deity. So what is item 19? Again, one should carefully avoid the various offenses in chanting the holy name of the Lord or in worshiping the deity. So first, we're going to look at offenses to the deity. One should not enter the temple of the deity in a cart or palanquin or with shoes on the feet. Now, of course, sometimes devotees go outside barefoot and then they just go inside barefoot. But as we'll see, there's another injunction to wash our feet. So it's not, if you're going outside barefoot, it's like you're wearing shoes in the temple, you know? Not fail to observe the festivals like Janmashtami and Rath Yatra. So, of course, we do this very much in our ISKCON society. We have all these wonderful festivals. We should not avoid bowing down. This is one thing I struggle with. It's like, okay, I got to bow down when I go in. I got to bow down when I go out. I got to go bow down when I go in. And whenever my mind tells me, I don't want to bow down again, I think, well, that's one of the offenses, is to avoid bowing down. Make sure you bow down. Enter to the temple to worship the Lord without having washed one's hands and feet after eating. So, to wash our hands before we eat, and then to wash our hands after we eat, and our feet also. I think not many of us probably wash our feet after we eat. We talked about being in a contaminated state. So after there's a death in the family, the Brahmanas have 12 days, Kshatriyas 15 days, for Shudras 30 days. I know I was brought up in Judaism, and we always had a period of mourning after a death where you stayed home and you had a chance to really grieve before you went out or did any work. And so I'm sure that this has some relationship to let people grieve, let people mourn, let people process. Because if you come to see the deity while you're still grieving, then you may not be in a proper state of mind to see the deity because you're still in a state. Not bowing down on one hand. This is sometimes difficult, right? If we're carrying things in our hand, and sometimes you can't put it on the floor. So what I'll do then is bow down without either hand. I'll just hold the thing in both hands. So not having only one hand. To circumambulate, this is in a clockwise movement, to go outside the temple structure. Of course, sometimes, like in our Mayapur temple, there's a circumambulation route inside the temple building. So most temples have a place to circumambulate the temple, either outside the building or outside the deities within the building. And this is a typical form of respect. It's interesting that this process is also done in other religions. Like in Islam, in Mecca, they circumambulate this big rock. Although they're so opposed to deity worship, they circumambulate this big rock in Mecca. The Jews circumambulate with the scroll. So they take the scroll and they go in a circle around in the temple. One should not spread his legs before the deity. That it's a rude way of sitting. Again, this is all to cultivate respect. Not holding the ankles, elbows, or knees with one's hand. So again, one should sit in a way that's respectful. One should not lie down before the deity. And when we go to friendship, we say sometimes a person in friendship will lie down in front of the deity out of intimacy and Raganuga sadhana, but generally this is disrespectful. One should not accept prasad in front of the deity. You know, I was brought up in a household where we had servants, and the servants always ate after we did, and they always had a separate place to eat. So this is the mood of being a servant. First Krishna eats, and then I eat, but I eat in a separate, after he eats, and I eat in a separate place. I don't eat in the master's room. One should never speak a lie before the deity. Of course, generally we shouldn't lie at all. But this idea that lying before the deity is very sinful is very much a part of Vedic culture. And so Prabhupada talks about that. If you wanted to make sure somebody was telling the truth, you bring them in front of the deity. I think it's something like the idea of you don't lie in court. You know, you might lie in your ordinary life, but if you lie in court, it's a crime. It's perjury. So to lie in front of the Lord, of course, we should realize the Lord is everywhere, but especially when I come into his personal presence, we shouldn't be lying. Not talking very loudly before the deity, you know, then we're forgetting that the Lord is a person, causing a disturbance. Yes, somebody has something to say here. Of course, wherever we're eating, the Lord is present. So that he would never be able to eat. But the idea is that in his own personal room, we're seeing him as the king, and we're the servants. So of course he's present even in our servants' quarters. He's present even in the toilet room. But we want to have this, cultivate this mood of service, that I'm the servant, this respectful mood. Talking with others before the deity, again, we're then ignoring him. It's almost like we're forgetting that he's there. Not crying or howling before the deity, not making a big disturbance. And Prabhupada says later, we should learn this small technique of how to cry for Krishna. But that's ecstatic. We don't want to make a big scene in front of the deity. It's very formal. Like you're going to see the Queen of England, you don't want to be making a big scene. Fighting or quarreling before the deity. I've seen this happen. I have seen it happen. People getting into big fights in front of the deity. Again, just think if we were in front of the Queen of England, you know, would we get into a big fight? Now, what's interesting about not chastising anyone before the deity, that I know people who don't like to go to a particular temple or don't like to go in a temple room because they were chastised in front of the deity, and so they subconsciously associate the shame and embarrassment of being chastised with being in a temple room. And so they don't want to be in a temple room. They don't want to be in front of the deities. So not only is it displeasing to the Lord, but it has a negative effect upon the person who's being chastised and their relationship with the Lord. So if we need to correct somebody, it should be outside of the temple room. We don't want people to have that negative association. and not being charitable to beggars in front of the deities. They can be outside the temple. Tell beggars if they need some food, if they need whatever, then they can be outside of the temple, but not right in front of the deities. When we're with the deities, we want to be focused on the deity. And speaking harshly. Again, we're trying to get this mood of reverence. We're trying to get this mood of respect in front of the Lord, not creating a disturbance in front of him. I'm not wearing a fur blanket before the deity. And one of my friends was saying, I thought we're not supposed to wear a fur blanket anywhere. Yes, but especially not in front of the deity. Now, this is a difficult one because we're also told to say the prayers to the Guru out loud. And like Prabhupada wrote about how we give the deities a financial accounting. So I've seen many times in front of the deities where we'll talk about, who distributed the most books, or who collected the most donations, or who gave the most donations, and we may praise them in front of the deities. That we're thinking, the deities will want to know. So if we're thinking, I'm informing the deity, this devotee distributed so many books, or informing the deity, this devotee has given so much money, then that is in the mood of seeing the deity as the master. But praising others in front of the deity, it's, again, we're taking our energy and our focus away from the deity. Like a husband might feel strange if his wife starts going on and on praising some other man in front of him, or a woman might feel strange if her husband goes on and on praising some other woman in front of her. So like that. Speaking ill names before the deity. So we don't want to be insulting. We don't want to be swearing in front of it. Again, this is the mood of respect, seeing the deity as God. And not passing air before the deity. Because if one needs to do this, one should leave the temple room. Memorial services we do in the temple room. I mean, again, normally that shouldn't be done in the temple room. It should probably be done in an outside hall, really, technically speaking, very honestly. Should not fail to worship the deity according to one's means. So Prabhupada brings up Patram Pushpam Pulam Twayam Yome Bhakta Praj. Bhakti Paritam Ashtami Paritam. Krishna is satisfied with a little water, a little leaf, a little fruit, a little water. Edification. And this is dealing with the costly temples. If I'm rich, then I should build a costly temple for Krishna. Why just give him a little bit of water? Yes, somebody has a question? No? So I should not eat anything that's not first offered to Krishna. Should make sure everything's offered to Krishna. This next one is interesting. Should not fail to offer fresh fruit and grains to Krishna according to the season. So I see many places we don't do that. I mean, here at New Goloka, we have a garden and they grow a lot of herbs in the garden, but not very many of the cooks go out in the garden and pick the herbs. I suppose they don't have time. And I was in one temple, they had a big property and they had a lot of fruit trees and the fruit was rotting on the trees while people were bringing donations brought from the market. So if we should be offering things to Krishna that are locally grown according to the season. It's very pleasing. But Ayurvedically, those are called rasayanas. And when we eat food that's locally, organically grown and we eat it in season. And Krishna very much likes that. So not only should we not eat food that's not offered to the deities, but we shouldn't give other people food that's not offered to the deities. So the food we eat should be offered and the food we offer to other people should be offered. This one's sometimes a little tricky. to not sit with my back toward the deity. Sometimes there's a performance for the pleasure of the deities, and the performers are facing the deities. And for me to see the performance, where do I get to sit? Or sometimes the Vyasa-san for class is at the back of the temple room. So sometimes one really has to figure out how to sit so that our back isn't to the deities. When we offer obeisances, we should say the prayers Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, etc. out loud, not just silently. Now here we have this kind of dichotomy. We're told not to eulogize anybody in front of the deities, and yet we're supposed to offer some praise to the guru when we see the guru. So if the guru is in front of the deities, what are we going to do? Anyway, best to do the praise outside of the temple room, or outside of when the curtains are open. So before we should respect the demigods, and here we're not supposed to criticize the demigods in front of the deities. The demigods are the Lord's servants, and the Lord doesn't like to hear his servants criticized. Yes, Mahalakshmi.
Yeah. Well, the spiritual master, we do praise in front of the deities with the curtain open when we offer Guru Puja.
This point has been discussed by many devotees for many, 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 many years. That why did Srila Prabhupada institute Guru Puja after deity greeting? For Tulsi worship, we don't. You'll notice that Tulsi worship always takes place when the curtains are closed. And traditionally, Guru Puja would also take place when the curtains are closed. But I remember when Prabhupada started Guru Puja, it was in the summer of '74, he would go out for a morning walk and he would come back, he'd leave at about 6. And then he'd come back, greeting the deities was like 7:15. So Prabhupada would come back and just in time he'd come from his morning walk right into the temple room for the darshan artik to greet the deities. And then he started having Guru Puja. Before that, he greeted the deities, then we went right into Bhagavatam class. So then Prabhupada added the Guru Puja between greeting the deities and Bhagavatam class. Now here in New Goloka, we do Guru Puja when the curtains are closed. So here in New Goloka, we have japa from 5 to 6. At 6, we have Tulsi Artik. 6:15, we have Guru Puja. 6:30, we have class. 7:15, the curtains open. Then we have bhajans. Everything's finished by 7:30. So we do that here. But this has been a long-standing question. Why did Srila Prabhupada do that? I don't know. Okay, now we're going to go to offenses mentioned in the Varaha Purana. We shouldn't touch the deity in a dark room, so there should be some kind of a light. We shouldn't fail to follow the rules and regulations, so not to be casual. I'm just going to make up my own system for deity worship, but we should worship the deity according to the rules. Of course, I think I mentioned this previously here in this class, mentioned it in some class, can't remember if it was here or not, that there's more than one system of deity worship, and you can customize a system of deity worship for your own particular deities you're worshiping, for your own particular needs. It's not that there's only one set of rules and regulations that has to be followed by everybody in all places and at all times. But one should be following an authorized process of deity worship and not just making up our own system. First, we should make some sound. So that's why most temples have a bell, or you can at least knock on the door. Where I'm staying here at the temple, I'm right next to the entrance to the bathrooms. And just yesterday, finally, someone put up a sign outside the bathroom so everybody can see where the bathrooms are. But I would have trouble sometimes with people, and I have a sign on my door that says private, but sometimes people would just open my door. I guess, the bathrooms are over there, and they just see a door and they don't really look and they just open it. I'd say, well, can't you knock first before you come in? So we're going into Krishna's room, we should knock first. One should not offer any foodstuff to the deities which has been seed by dogs or lower animals. This is a problem with people who keep dogs and cats in the house, and the animals are lusting over the food before it's offered. One should not break silence while worshiping. So when we're doing puja, we should be giving Krishna our full attention, not be talking with people. So we shouldn't pass urine or evacuate while worshiping. So our toilet business should be done before our worship or after, but not in the middle. Obviously, if we have some disease, emergency, but generally We should try to organize our bodily activities so that we don't have to leave in the middle to go use the toilet. So when we offer incense, we should also offer a flower. And we should only offer flowers with fragrance. This is definitely a problem. A lot of the flowers that we can get commercially in temperate climates in the winter are grown for appearance and longevity after transport and not for fragrance. A lot of the flowers with fragrance don't look as good. They don't ship as well. I know Indra said that he felt he was the personification of this offense. He said, "This is me. I'm a flower without fragrance." So I know a devotee who was born without a sense of smell. And she said when she was growing up in the movement, and she said she can never understand why everybody took the flowers and stuck them in their noses. Never make, because she has no sense of smell. So she said it never made any sense to her. What were people doing with these flowers? So I've been in many temples where they're offering flowers without a fragrance, and they take them around. I mean, now in COVID, nobody does it. Where they took them around and everybody's smelling this flower that has no scent. And I just feel very ritualistic. You know, I take this flower in my nose when there's no scent in the flower. One should not fail to wash his teeth very carefully every day. One should not enter the temple directly after sexual intercourse. One should bathe first. One should not touch a woman during her menstrual period. I mean, Prabhupada was not strict about this. Prabhupada even said if there's no one else to worship the deity, that the women could even worship the deity during that time, although he said it's better not to do it. He said for the deity worship and for the cooking. Today we'll have Tulsi Artik at 4:30. The curtains will be open. Okay, but generally in the morning, the curtains are closed. And one should not enter the temple after touching a dead body. Took me a long time to find this picture. Someone asked me, does that include bugs? So I don't know. I'm not going to want to shower just every time I move some dead bug out of my room. But in general. Now with this one, Prabhupada never did anything about blue and red clothing. So, and in fact, marriages, which we do in front of the deities, the woman wears red clothing. So this is another one I've never found anyone who can explain it. But clothes that are dirty, or clothes that are stained, even after you wash them, they still look dirty. Again, we're going in front of the Lord, and we should have some respect that the clothes we wear are clean, and they look clean, and they look decent. We don't want to look, you know. There's a tradition among Christians that when you go to church on Sunday, you wear your especially nice clothes. So this concept of going before the Lord, that one should go in clothes that are neat and clean and attractive. So not enter the temple after seeing a dead body. Again, I don't think this includes insects. And two of these, there is exactly the same. One should not pass air within the temple. I don't know why it's repeated, but it's the same. One should not be angry within the temple. So this doesn't just involve, you know, yelling and screaming, but in other words, when anger comes through us, we should let it go. We should observe it and let it go, not be holding on to anger in front of the Lord. There are a lot of things here about death. So we can't touch a dead body. No death in the family recently. Not touching a dead body, not seeing a dead body, not visiting a crematorium. I don't know what the crematorium workers do if they never can come to the temple. But at least one should take a bath and put on clean clothes. After seeing a dead body, touching a dead body, or going to a crematorium. Now you can understand that this might spread disease. You're going to a temple in a crowded place. And not belching before the deity, and Prabhupada says, we shouldn't go into the temple until we fully digested our food. Then not taking intoxicants. So marijuana, opium, or other intoxicants. So if we're going to worship the deity, we should not be taking intoxicants.
Mother Urmila, what about if a devotee needs to take like pain medication or something like that that has some sort of intoxicating effect?
That's different. You know, Prabhupada one time in a class, he was talking about how everything has its use, and he was talking about how opium stops dysentery. I mean, one of the interesting things with what they're calling the opioid epidemic right now, and not so many people on opioids for pain, is that then there's another big pharmaceutical business with dealing with the constipation of all the people who are on the opioids, because it's all the opium derivatives, they slow down one's breathing. That's how people die of an opioid overdose. It relaxes all the muscles. And so it relaxes the diaphragm, so a person's breathing is slowed down, and it relaxes the intestines, so a person's digestion is slowed down. But one may have to take these things for some medical reason, not for the purpose of being intoxicated. But one should not take these things for the purpose of being intoxicated. Or, you know, sometimes there are herbal tinctures that require alcohol and things like that. One should not enter the deity room or touch the body of the deity after having smeared oil over his body, and we're going to get grease all over the deity. You know, in India, the old process of bathing, instead of with soap, it was with oil. So you put oil all over your body, but then you took a bath. Not disrespect to any scripture teaching about the supremacy of the Lord. So we shouldn't show disrespect to any scripture from any religion that's teaching about the glories of the Lord. But this is interesting. One should not introduce any opposing scripture. I spent quite a lot of time looking up what this meant. And the basic conclusion I could come to is that we shouldn't be preaching scriptures that oppose bhakti. It may look like scripture, and in one sense it may be scripture, but it's simply going to cause trouble. It will be a wolf in sheep's clothing. So we don't want to be preaching scriptures that oppose bhakti. And the Vedic canon of scriptures has scriptures for people in mode of ignorance, people in mode of passion. Under the Vedic umbrella. But if we're going to be engaging in pure devotional service, we should not be referencing such scriptures. So we have a mild intoxicant, betel. We shouldn't be chewing that before the deity. And it took me a long, long time to find these pictures. That we should keep our flowers in a clean pot. So if we have flowers in a vase on the altar, or vase, however you want to say it, we should make sure that the vase or the vase is clean, the bucket is clean. Change the water enough times. You know, after the plants are in some water for a while, the water would become dirty. Again, this is a sign of respect. Now, this is interesting to me that when we worship the Lord, we should have a carpet, some kind of sitting place. It's interesting to me because this is a very important principle for the Muslims, that when they say their prayer 5 times a day, that they're sitting on a carpet. They're not sitting on the bare floor. And this is, again, a sense of respect for the worship, that we're showing some reverence for the worship. This was a hard thing to try to figure out how I was going to illustrate. So we don't want to have a half bath. So before we do our puja of the deities, we want to make sure we have a full bath. We want to have done half shaving, half bathing, not properly bathed. Then the kind of tilak we wear is indicative of our sampradaya. So the 3-line tilak indicates a Shaivite. So we want to put on the tilak of our proper sampradaya. Of course, we have a particular Gaudiya sampradaya, and then there's divisions within the Gaudiya sampradaya, like Shamananda has this particular kind of tilak. Washing the hands and feet. So at least in a tropical country like India, where people are often walking barefoot or they're walking with open sandals, in one of these pictures, you can see here's an automatic foot washing arrangement. So when you go to Tirumala, your feet are automatically washed as you go in the temple. It's really cool. And there are many temples that have a foot washing place. The Muslims are also very particular about this. Now, in cold climates where we're wearing covered shoes and socks, this is not so much of an issue to wash your feet. But again, we find the Muslims will do this in all climates. They wash their feet up to the knees and their hands up to the elbows before they enter a mosque. And we should worship the Lord without a non-devotee around. And our worship of the Lord is intimate. We're talking about our puja. It's intimate when we're bathing the Lord, we're addressing the Lord, and the other people there should also be in a respectful mood. So we have about Ganapati. And where Rupa Goswami is saying that because Ganapati worships Nrsingadev, he can clear all impediments. So we should worship Ganapati in order to clear our impediments. And this is fascinating because when Srila Prabhupada was asked directly, well, Prabhupada, you wrote in your Nectar of Devotion based on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that we should worship Ganesh. Prabhupada wrote, I do not encourage you to worship this demigod Ganesh. It is not required. It is not necessary. Simply worship Krishna. Perform nice devotional service to Krishna. Then your lives will certainly become perfect. Of course, if one has got some sentiment for achieving the blessings of Ganesh for accumulating large sums of money to serve Krishna, then he may perform this Ganesh worship privately, not making a public show. But first of all, he must give me $100,000 per month, not a single farthing less. If he can supply this amount, $100,000 per month, then he will be allowed to do this Ganesh puja. Otherwise, he should not do it. It will not be good. That is my order. Very funny instruction. So it should not be bathed in water which has been touched by the nails or fingers, again, for cleanliness, for respect. If a devotee is perspiring, should not worship the deity. This is a little hard in tropical countries during the hot season. I mean, we do have fans on the altar or sometimes air conditioning, but sometimes it's a little difficult. Not stepping over the flowers offered to the deities. So we don't want to step over Shastra. We don't want to step over the flowers. We want to show them respect. So this is also in the Bible, not to take a vow in the name of God. We don't want to obligate God to keep our vows. Okay, somebody who could read this?
Even when a person becomes an offender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, he can still be delivered simply by taking the shelter of the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In other words, the chanting of Hare Krishna is beneficial for eradicating all sins. But if one becomes an offender to the holy names of the Lord, then he has no chance of being delivered.
All right. Now we're going to look at offenses to the holy name, to blaspheme the devotees who dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name. And this is from a lecture, initiation lecture of Jayapataka Maharaj, 1968. And we're here is Srila Prabhupada defining this offense. He says, and those who are preaching God consciousness, never mind in any part of the world, those who are preaching God consciousness in your country, Christian, not in your country. Of course, it was preached in Central Asia, but now Christianism is spread all over. So Lord Jesus Christ, he also preached God consciousness. And Muhammad, Hazrat Muhammad, he also preached God consciousness. Similarly, in India, there were several acharyas, Ramanuja, Madhva, God consciousness they preached. So Srila Prabhupada's making this point here, not blaspheming devotees, means don't criticize the preachers in other religious traditions. And of course, this is perhaps one of our biggest impediments to Krishna consciousness, is criticizing devotees, whether within our tradition or others. This is the biggest impediment to bhakti, the mad elephant offense. I'm more devoted than you are. My group is more devoted than your group. My guru is more devoted than your guru. This is the biggest obstacle in bhakti. Destroys bhakti. To consider the names of demigods like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. Can someone read this slide, please?
Sometimes the atheistic class of men take it that any demigod is as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. But one who is a devotee knows that no demigod, however great he may be, is independently as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, if someone thinks that he can chant Kali Kali or Durga Durga, and it is the same as Hare Krishna, that is the greatest offense.
That's interesting. Prabhupada saying here is the greatest offense. Generally, the first offense or the third offense are considered the greatest, sometimes the seventh. So disobey the orders of the spiritual master. This is one reason why spiritual masters hesitate to give a lot of orders. And they will not give orders that they feel disciples cannot follow. So we talked about, over endeavoring in spiritual life. So spiritual masters will be very careful not to give orders that for disciples will be over endeavor, or that for disciples will not be able to follow, because then the gurus will be responsible for this. So generally gurus give a small number of orders and are very, very careful. So blaspheming the Vedic literatures we should show respect to other literature. We shouldn't blaspheme them. Anything that's helping one in the Vedas, we shouldn't be criticizing him. To think the glories of chanting is our imaginations. Oh, it's not really that great. To give some kind of weird interpretation. Well, it's just the way you're breathing when you're chanting. That's the whole thing. Now, sometimes this is taken as the greatest offense. Right? Can somebody read this?
It should not be taken that because by chanting the holy name of the Lord, one can be freed from all kinds of sinful reaction. One may continue to act sinfully and after that chant Hare Krishna to neutralize his sins. Such a dangerous mentality is very offensive and should be avoided.
So this doesn't mean that, we're all going to be perfect. It just means that we shouldn't have the mood that, well, I'm a devotee, so whatever I do is just going to be excused. It's taking Krishna's friendship and Krishna's kindness wrongly. Like the son of some rich person who commits crimes and says, oh, my daddy will get me out of jail. Okay, to take Hare Krishna, chanting Hare Krishna is a ritualistic ceremony. This is taking the bhakti and the holy name particularly as something mechanical, something mechanistic. It's forgetting that Krishna is a person, forgetting that bhakti is about a relationship with a person. I'm just going to do this and this and this, and then I'm going to be enlightened. I'm going to get bliss. And here we have again, this is one of the main do nots, and it's again one of the offenses, to instruct a faithless person. Can somebody read this?
Yes. Anyone can take part in chanting the holy name of the Lord, but in the beginning, one should not be instructed about the transcendental potency of the Lord. Those who are too sinful cannot appreciate the transcendental glories of the Lord, and therefore it is better not to instruct them in this matter.
Thank you. When we instruct people above their level of faith, we will cause them to commit offenses. And instructing people above their level of faith indicates pride on our own part. It's not we're not really trying to help them in bhakti.
Mother, Hare Krishna, would you say that Srila Prabhupada took a big risk in wanting to so widely distribute his books? Because the books obviously do preach the glories, the transcendental glories of the Lord and the holy names.
It's interesting you bring this up. I'd say yes and no. I'd say from a very technical, legalistic perspective, what Srila Prabhupada did was actually kind of outrageous. I mean, and giving books like Ishopanishad, which are Shruti, to people in general, which is forbidden in the Shastras. You don't let people read the Shrutis if they haven't already received Diksha and aren't already in Sattva-gun. However, what I see, and I realize I'm prejudiced, okay? I'm Srila Prabhupada's disciple. I'm a member of Srila Prabhupada's movement. So somebody perhaps who's not a member of Prabhupada's movement or not in the Gaudiya Sampradaya might say that I'm speaking this out of bias and out of affection, and okay. I'm not going to argue with that. I'm not going to say that I'm fully objective here. But my perception is that Srila Prabhupada had a very unique kind of empowerment. That Srila Prabhupada could take things which normally would have been prohibited, and he could package them in a way that people would not be offensive. And this is true even if you're going to talk about, Krishna book, where, Prabhupada's, we're just reading in that, we're going to read in some later chapters, Nectar of Devotion, that nobody should be reading the Rasa Leela unless they're purified. But Prabhupada's having Krishna book about Rasa Leela, we're distributing this to people who are eating meat and drinking alcohol and so forth. So how is this? But Srila Prabhupada, in his books, he presented things in such a way that people could understand them. And it's some incredible Shakti.
Yes.
It's just an incredible, incredible, incredible Shakti that Srila Prabhupada in his books has packaged and presented Krishna consciousness in a way that does not involve breaking these prohibitions. It does not involve these offenses. We should be very careful. We may not have that empowerment. So Prabhupada had this very particular empowerment. It's very extraordinary because there's a lot of prohibitions like this. Don't reveal the Vedas to low-born people, and don't reveal the Vedas to people who aren't following. And we're going out and giving it to them on the street. That's unbelievable, actually. It's unbelievable. But we're seeing that overall, there's some exceptions, but overall, people are not, that those prohibitions and it's not being broken. We do have some people that read Prabhupada's books and just criticize, but that's unusual, actually. Those are definitely the exceptions. We have a question here from Prasant. Ajamil took the name of his son at the time of death. He had no intention of taking the Lord's name. Is considered pure chanting. It's not actually considered pure chanting. Ajamil's chanting is considered namabash. It's considered a shadow of chanting. It was not considered offensive. The reason it was not considered offensive is that it was innocent. So there's two different kinds of namabash. One kind of namabash, or shadow of nam, is a person is just saying, let's go to the Cinerama. Or look, there's some Hare Krishna singing across the street. So the person is kind of innocent, and there's no offense given, and it's considered to be a shadow of the holy name. And another kind of namabhas, which Prabhupada says leads to liberation, is where one is in the clearing stage, where one is still sometimes making offenses, but one is clearing those offenses. And we find that after Ajamila was there with the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas, then he went on to perform bhakti and mature his devotion. Okay, do not have complete faith in the chanting of the holy name to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. So this is not an offense to have material attachments, because we all start out having material attachments. But this offense is to nourish and feed our material attachments because we don't have faith that Krishna consciousness will work. So we're trying to have like a backup plan of our material attachments. We're still, we're going through the process of bhakti externally, but actually our focus is on materialistic life. And we're nourishing it, we're feeding it, we're maintaining it. And then every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must guard against these offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. So, any questions on these chapters, 6 through 8?
Personally, Mother, I feel as the chapters are going, it's really getting heavier and heavier. When in the mode of ignorance and all, not knowing about the Lord, it was much more easier to think about the Lord in a simple way. But when the offenses are coming, okay, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, and all, finally it is like, okay.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's like, okay, we have this Ajamila, he's chanting in innocence. And that sounds like, why don't I just stay innocent and then I'm not responsible.
Be a fool for the lifetime.
Yeah, just stay a fool for the lifetime. That reminds me, like, Lord Chaitanya said, I'm a fool in front of my guru. But that doesn't mean we should keep ourselves foolish. There's this, there's a devotee wrote to Srila Prabhupada, eternally your useless servant. And Prabhupada was laughing. Like, why do you eternally want to stay my useless servant? So, it's just like, I keep giving the example because I see him almost every day, my little 1-year-old great grandson. So at this point, he's ignorant, he's foolish. And so we don't hold him responsible for practically anything. We were sitting at dinner and there's his 3-year-old brother there. So, the 1-year-old, he can't even talk. I mean, he can say hi and bye and jai, and that's about it. A few things. And so when he wants water, he just goes, and then I have to kind of figure out he wants water. So then his 3-year-old brother said, I want water. And his father said to him, you have to say, please. Right? You have to say, please. And then he's like, but Nasinga didn't say, please.
Yeah.
So we won't be expected to behave. It's like, that's kind of a high price. If I want to stay like a 1-year-old, it's not really very pleasing to stay. As we mature, then we have to become more responsible. That's a fact, That's a fact. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm like, why do I have to become more responsible? Why can't I just be like a 1-year-old? But I had a student many years ago who was mentally ill and also, what do we say now? Intellectually challenged. So he had a very low IQ and also he was mentally ill. And so he wasn't responsible for very much. He could only do things that were really easy. And I looked at that and I thought, I wonder how he got this situation. And I thought, he just,
Oh, Hare Krishna Mataji, we are not able to hear you.
He's gone.
You froze up.
Yeah. It's like,
Okay, Hare Krishna. Now she will unfreeze.
sorry, it looks like my internet dropped and came back. Is your relationship with the spiritual master eternal? Not necessarily with the same person. Like Bilva Mangala Thakur, it says his guru spoke through Chintamani. But I would assume in the spiritual world, we still have some feeling of obligation and gratitude.
So this concept of spiritual master, accepting a spiritual master, it's a principle, right?
That's what Prabhupada says. And I'll see if I can find this for you.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Like,
Yes.
if we are, so by Krishna's grace, one can go to one can get liberated without a spiritual master. You are talking about that.
It's possible.
So, yeah, if it is, if somebody is getting liberated in that way, will there be any relationship like how we have the Vatsalya Rasa, all this kind of relationship, conjugal love? And how about that person who gets liberated by Krishna's mercy? Like, is there going to be a relationship or just like just liberation? Like,
Why couldn't Krishna give them everything?
okay.
You know, but don't worry, you're not going to meet people like this. This is extremely, extremely unusual. You actually might hear of people like this. I mean, I have certainly read accounts that sound like this kind of thing, that sound just like Kripa City. I've certainly read accounts of people like that. But even in those situations, there was usually some touch with the devotee at some point. You know, I mean, just maybe not in a formal way, you know, with taking a guru and getting initiation, but there was some, all the instances I know of, there was some kind of touch with a devotee.
Thank you.
I mean, there may be some cases where there isn't, but generally Krishna remains neutral, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And that Krishna's mercy follows the mercy of the devotee. So generally there needs to be some touch with the devotee in order for a person to become God realized, in order for a person to become enlightened in any way. Generally, because Krishna remains neutral. However, I could at least imagine some circumstance where that wouldn't be the case. But there are certainly cases of people achieving high levels of God realization without going through a formal process. It's called Kripa Siddhi. But we shouldn't expect that. It's definitely unusual. It's not the norm. And it's not that we should say, well, I'm just not going to go through a formal process then, because then we're missing the whole point. Yes, Maharaj.
Prabhu, you mentioned that Bilmavangala Thakur, his spiritual master was Chintamani. Of course, that's a very extreme example. For instance, devotees who are following Srila Prabhupada, they have given all their life to Srila Prabhupada, and they are not going to have a relationship with Srila Prabhupada in the spiritual
world. Well, the question that I had asked many years ago, I asked this in 1978 or 79. So, Prabhupada had just left, and if you wanted to take initiation, you would take initiation from Srila Prabhupada's disciples. So I was thinking, some of the children born in the movement, they might have been initiated in a previous life. And some of these people giving initiation now in ISKCON might not have been gurus in a previous life. So how could the children, if they had been initiated in a previous life, how could they have exactly the same guru in the next life? And I was thinking about myself. I thought, well, if I were to die now and I were to come back and take birth in ISKCON, I couldn't have Prabhupada as my Diksha guru because he's not here. I'd have to take Diksha from one of his disciples. Indeed, I know of a case like that. So there was this devotee, was a brahmachari, and Prabhupada had already written a letter accepting this devotee as his disciple. The yagya was supposed to be the next day. They were going to do the yagya the next day. So you could say the initiation wasn't completed. Anyway, there was a car accident, and this brahmachari gave up his body. So some years later, 16, 17 years later, in the same general area of the world, and that brahmachari was British. This is in Great Britain. He was white British. So there was a young Indian girl. She had been born in Great Britain to an Indian family. She was 16, and she joined the Hare Krishna movement. And she took initiation from Bhakti Charu Swami. And she would have recurring dreams of being in a car accident. She had recurring dreams of like going to her initiation and knocking over the paraphernalia and kind of like missing the yajna. And at one point, she attended the funeral of someone else who had been in that car accident but not died. You know, someone who died years later, like 20 years later, but who had been in that car accident. And at the funeral, somebody said, you know, this person had many friends. Too bad. It's too bad that this other brahmachari is not still alive also. And she said immediately she was thinking, but I'm right here. I'm right here. Here I am. And she couldn't understand, why am I thinking like this? And there were many other situations. So finally she wrote to Bhakti True Swami, and she also wrote to Tamal Krishna Maharaj and said, I don't know what's going on with me. And they suggested that she do some past life regressions and things. And she was actually able to confirm very strongly that she had been this brahmachari in her previous life. And in her previous life as a brahmachari, she was particularly attracted to one Indian girl that he was thinking about marrying. And so the person took birth in the next life as an Indian girl and joined the temple. It was very interesting with this girl. She got married. She got married to a Polish devotee, but she was never really into being married. She just wanted to go on Harinam all the time. I remember her husband saying, being married to this woman, it's like being married to another brahmachari. You know, actually the person still had this mood of being a brahmachari and would go out on Harinam 3 times a day. And finally they divorced. I mean, she really could not get into being a woman and being a wife. And anyway, she has this very interesting story. She's written up her story about this. So you could say on one hand, I mean, the brahmachari is in the book of Prabhupada's disciples because Prabhupada accepted this devotee in a letter, although the yajna was never performed. So you could say that this is a disciple of Prabhupada who then comes back and takes birth and becomes a disciple of Bhakti Gurus. And such a thing is entirely reasonable. So does it mean we're going to have to, that we have, and we read in the Nectar of Devotion already that one who takes up Krishna consciousness, generally they've taken up in previous lives. So we can assume that at least a good number of us were initiated by somebody in a previous life. Is it going to be exactly the same jiva? I don't think that's reasonable. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's reasonable to say that, you know, if one has more than one life, that it's going to be the same jiva. So we found with Chintamani, it said that Bilvamangala's guru from his previous life, because in his previous life, when he had left his body, he had come to the stage of bhava. And it says that his guru from his previous life spoke through Chintamani. It is now 3 minutes overtime, and so we're going to stop. You can take all these quotes about how the guru is a principle. We will see you, Krishna willing, next Sunday. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother.
Hare
Thank you so
Krishna.
much.
Bhagavad Gita.
Jai.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.